Story 1. My older sister sabotaged my career at a crucial moment, and now she's struggling to rebuild her life from scratch. It all started in the spring of 2021 when I finally landed an interview for my dream job at a renowned tech company in San Francisco. I had spent years studying, working on personal projects, and accumulating experience, and now I had the opportunity to demonstrate all of it. My sister, Laura, had always been the brilliant one in the family, with a successful career in digital marketing. She lived in New York and always seemed to have everything under control. Although we were close, there was always a slight tension between us due to our different personalities. I was more reserved and meticulous, while Laura was extroverted and bold. The night before my interview, Laura arrived for an unexpected visit. We were celebrating my recent college graduation together, and excitement was in the air. As we talked about the future and our goals, I couldn't help but notice that Laura seemed a bit anxious. I thought that maybe she was stressed about her own work, so I didn't give it much importance. The next day, I woke up early, excited but nervous about the interview. I meticulously prepared, reviewing possible questions and making sure my outfit was perfect. However, when I checked my email that morning, I discovered something that left me frozen. A notification from the company informing me that my interview had been canceled due to internal issues. I tried to think rationally, but my mind kept spinning. Why would they cancel my interview? There were no signs of problems at the company, and up until then, everything seemed to be going smoothly with my application. I decided to contact the company directly to get an explanation, but they told me that everything was in order and that they were simply adjusting their schedule. Frustrated and confused, I decided to confront Laura about the cancellation. She, with a carefree smile, told me that she had been very busy and had forgotten to mention something important. It was then that she revealed the truth. Laura had spoken to the hiring manager, who turned out to be her old college friend, and had secured my position at the company. However, he informed me that Laura had expressed doubts about my ability to handle the position and had recommended postponing my interview until I demonstrated more commitment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt a mixture of anger and betrayal. Laura, instead of supporting me, had decided to sabotage my career opportunities. When I confronted her, she simply shrugged and said she was trying to help me find a more realistic path. I was speechless and feeling helpless. I decided not to give up and continued looking for other opportunities. However, the seed of doubt had been planted. There was something about me that Laura thought wasn't right. I began to question my skills and my worth, not only in the professional sphere, but also in my relationship with my sister. That experience left deep scars and changed the dynamic between us. Before, we were accomplices and confidants, but now there was an invisible barrier separating us. Laura continued with her life in New York, while I stayed in San Francisco, trying to rebuild my career and my self-esteem. In the following months, I worked hard to overcome this obstacle. I took additional courses, sought mentorship, and immersed myself in freelance projects to prove my worth. Although it was a difficult path, each small success helped me regain the confidence I had lost. However, the shadow of my sister's betrayal was always present, reminding me of the fragility of family relationships and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly want your success. After the bitter experience with Laura, I decided I couldn't let her betrayal define my future. San Francisco is a vibrant city, full of opportunities, and I was determined to make the most of them. I immersed myself fully in my work as a lab technician at the Research Institute, dedicating long hours to perfecting my skills and building a solid network of contacts. One day, while working on an important project on renewable energy, I met Marcus, a brilliant scientist who had recently arrived from Chicago to collaborate on the project. Marcus had a charismatic personality and a contagious passion for science, which made him an ideal coworker. We soon began to collaborate closely, sharing ideas and challenges mutually to reach new levels of excellence. Our collaboration quickly bore fruit. Together, we submitted an innovative proposal for a new type of solar panel that could revolutionize the energy industry. The proposal was well received by the Institute's management, and we were invited to present our project at an international conference in New York. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for to prove my worth and leave behind the shadow of my sister's betrayal. Meanwhile, my personal life also began to improve. Through Marcus, I met Emma, a graphic designer who worked in the same building. Emma had an artistic sensibility that perfectly complemented my analytical approach. We spent hours discussing art, science, and our personal aspirations. Over time, our friendship transformed into something deeper, and soon we found ourselves inseparable. However, just when everything seemed to be heading towards a promising future, I received an unexpected call from my father. Laura had been in a car accident in Los Angeles and was in critical condition in the hospital. My heart stopped for a moment. Despite all the pain she had caused me, I still felt a mixture of concern and compassion for her. I decided to take a week off to be by her side. Flying to Los Angeles was an emotional journey. Upon arriving at the hospital, I met my mother, who had been caring for Laura since the accident. It was the first time I had seen my mother after so many years, since she passed away in the fire I mentioned in part 1. The sadness in her eyes was palpable, and I understood that Laura was not alone in her struggle. Laura awoke in the hospital with a lost look. At first, she didn't recognize me, and the pain on her face was evident. Over time, we began to talk, and although the words were difficult to find, I could see that there were also deep wounds in her heart. Laura confessed that she had felt constant envy towards me, especially when she saw how my career was taking off while hers seemed stagnant. Her sabotage was not an act of pure malice, but a reflection of an internal struggle she never knew how to handle. During those days in the hospital, I worked on rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Every conversation was a mixture of resentment and understanding. We decided to attend family therapy together, hoping to heal the scars of the past. It was a painful but necessary process, which allowed us to see beyond our differences and recognize the fraternal love that still existed between us. Back in San Francisco, my relationship with Laura began to heal slowly. She decided to move to the city to be closer to the family and started working at a small digital marketing agency, seeking to rebuild her career from scratch. Although there were still moments of tension, we were both committed to leaving the past behind and supporting each other in our new beginnings. Marcus and I continued working on our solar panel project, and the presentation in New York was a resounding success. Not only did we obtain funding for our project, but we also gained recognition in the scientific community. This achievement not only boosted my career, but also strengthened my self-esteem, reminding me that my abilities were unwavering. Emma and I decided to take the next step in our relationship, moving in together. I felt that I had finally found my place in the world, surrounded by people who valued and genuinely supported me. As time went on, Laura also found her way. Her agency began to gain clients and recognition, and she gradually left behind the shadow of her tumultuous past. Our sisterly relationship strengthened, now based on honesty and mutual support. We learned to communicate effectively, sharing our joys and challenges without fear of being judged. A year after that fateful day at the Institute, Marcus and I officially launched our renewable energy company, with the backing of our successful presentation in New York. The company took off quickly, becoming a benchmark in the industry. Seeing our ideas come to life and contribute to a more sustainable future was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Looking back, I realize how much I have grown and the lessons I have learned. Laura's betrayal, although painful, taught me not to depend on anyone else for my success and to trust in my own effort and dedication. In addition, the reconciliation with my sister showed me that even the most damaged relationships can heal with time, patience, and understanding. San Francisco was no longer just the city where I rebuilt my career, but also the place where I rediscovered the value of family, friendship, and love. Each day was a new opportunity to move forward, overcome obstacles, and celebrate the achievements I had worked so hard to achieve. And so, with the support of Marcus, Emma, and a renewed relationship with Laura, I was ready to face any challenge the future might hold. With the success of our renewable energy company, my life took a completely unexpected turn. San Francisco became my new home, a place where every corner breathed innovation and opportunity. Marcus and I were excited about the future, but I still felt like something was missing. Although my relationship with Emma was flourishing and my relationship with Laura was slowly mending, the shadow of past betrayal was still present, reminding me that family wounds don't heal overnight. One day, while attending a sustainability conference in Los Angeles, I received an urgent call from Laura. Her voice sounded weak, but determined. "I need your help," she said without preamble. Something has gone wrong at my new job, and I don't know who else to turn to. I decided that, despite our past differences, I couldn't leave her in this time of need. I flew to Los Angeles immediately, leaving Emma and Marcus with the promise to resolve this family crisis. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, I met Laura at a small cafe near her new office. She was visibly stressed, with dark circles under her eyes that betrayed nights of insomnia and worry. She explained that she had started at an emerging digital marketing agency, but since her arrival, she had faced a series of inexplicable obstacles. Her ideas were constantly dismissed, and she felt that her colleagues were conspiring against her to undermine her reputation. I decided to investigate further. Laura had an impeccable reputation in New York, so something had clearly changed. I started reviewing her emails and messages, looking for clues as to who might be behind this new sabotage campaign. I soon discovered that one of her new colleagues, who had a history of toxic and manipulative behavior at work, seemed to be the culprit. It appeared Laura had chosen her work environment poorly. Armed with this information, I arranged a meeting with the agency manager, who happened to be an old contact of Marcus's in Los Angeles. During the meeting, I presented my findings and expressed concerns about the work environment Laura was facing. The manager, surprised but receptive, promised to take immediate action to address the situation. They implemented mediation sessions and began to closely monitor interactions within the team. Meanwhile, Laura and I worked together to rebuild her confidence and establish a stronger presence in the agency. We began collaborating on innovative campaigns that highlighted her creativity and strategic skills. Gradually, her colleagues began to recognize her talent, and the atmosphere in the office improved noticeably. Laura thanked me deeply for my support, and I felt our relationship was flourishing again. Back in San Francisco, Emma and I celebrated the success of the Los Angeles conference. We decided to spend a weekend in Napa Valley to disconnect and enjoy a well-deserved break. The rolling hills and picturesque vineyards offered us the perfect refuge to relax and reconnect. It was during one of our sunset walks that Emma confessed how much she admired my determination and resilience. Her unconditional support reminded me of the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly value you. Meanwhile, Marcus received an offer to collaborate with a prestigious university in Boston, which meant a possible relocation for him. After many conversations, we decided that he would accept the offer and I would support him in his decision. This decision further strengthened our professional and personal relationship, as we were both willing to sacrifice for each other's growth. A few months later, I received an invitation to present our solar panel project at a technology fair in Las Vegas. It was a golden opportunity to expand our network of contacts and attract additional investors. Emma, always enthusiastic about supporting my achievements, helped me prepare the presentation, combining her artistic talent with my technical knowledge to create an impressive display. The fair was a resounding success. Our booth attracted numerous investors and potential partners, and our company received funding offers that accelerated our growth. In addition, I met several innovators and entrepreneurs who shared my passion for sustainability, which further enriched my professional network. However, not everything was success and celebration. During the fair, I received devastating news. Laura had suffered a relapse in her recovery. Despite the progress we had made in her career, the stress and pressure had driven her to a breaking point. I decided that I couldn't abandon my sister again, so I stayed in Las Vegas to support her during her difficult time. During those weeks, the fair became a backdrop for our personal struggle. Laura attended therapy sessions and began to rebuild her inner strength, while I handled the responsibilities of our company from a relative distance. Marcus, understanding the situation, offered his help to manage some of the daily operations, allowing me to focus on supporting Laura. Finally, after a month full of emotional ups and downs, Laura began to show signs of improvement. Her determination to overcome her challenges was inspiring, and our relationship became deeper and more understanding. We decided it was time to return to San Francisco, carrying with us the lessons learned and a renewed hope for the future. Back in the city, we focused on consolidating our lives and careers. Our renewable energy company grew exponentially, expanding into new regions and establishing strategic alliances with other leading companies in the industry. Marcus, now in Boston, maintained constant communication, making sure our collaboration remained strong despite the distance. Laura, for her part, found a new balance between her personal and professional life. Her digital marketing agency thrived, and she became an advocate for mental health in the workplace, sharing her story to inspire others to seek help when they need it. Our sisterly relationship became a fundamental pillar in our lives, reminding us that, despite differences and challenges, love and mutual support can overcome even the most difficult trials. Looking back, I realize how much we have grown, both individually and together. San Francisco was no longer just the place where I had rebuilt my career, but also where I had found a deeper sense of purpose and community. With Marcus, Emma, and Laura by my side, I felt ready to face any challenge life might throw at me. However, fate had other plans in store for us. Just when everything seemed to be in place, a new threat emerged from the past, testing everything we had built. Just when I thought everything was finally in place, life decided to throw us a new curveball. It was the fall of 2023, and San Francisco was covered in golden leaves that crunched beneath our feet as we walked through Golden Gate Park. The renewable energy company that Marcus and I had founded was booming, and our personal relationships seemed stronger than ever. However, a shadow from the past began to loom over us, threatening to destabilize everything we had built. One Tuesday morning, while reviewing some financial reports in my office, I received an email that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was from an unknown sender, with the subject line, "You need to know the truth." The message was short, but shocking. It claimed to have compromising information about my family past that could destroy my reputation and, consequently, that of my company. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Who would want to do this to me? And what did they know about my life that I didn't? I decided not to respond immediately. Instead, I talked to Marcus and Emma, who supported me unconditionally. Marcus, always analytical, suggested that we investigate who might be behind this and what kind of information they might have. Emma, with her instincts, proposed that we use her network of contacts to track the sender. Together, we began to unravel the mystery. Our investigation led us to discover that the email came from a former colleague of Laura's at the digital marketing agency in Los Angeles. This individual, named Kevin, had had a strained relationship with Laura due to creative and personal differences. It seemed that Kevin had held a grudge for years and saw in me an opportunity to indirectly take revenge on Laura, taking advantage of any vulnerability to wreak havoc. As we delved deeper into the investigation, we discovered that Kevin had been contacting other colleagues and clients of Laura's, trying to sow doubts about her professional integrity. At the same time, Laura began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of her coworkers. They seemed to have distanced themselves from her suddenly, and she noticed furtive glances and whispers when she passed by the offices. Worried, she told me that she had received anonymous messages insinuating that her recent success was a facade and that everything would soon collapse. I understood immediately that Kevin was not only targeting me, but also Laura, trying to destabilize both of us. We decided to join forces more closely than ever. We organized daily meetings to discuss progress and strategies, making sure to maintain open and transparent communication. Marcus used his connections in the industry to track Kevin's digital activity, while Emma designed awareness campaigns to protect our public image and counter any false information that might be spread. One Saturday afternoon, while Laura and I were working on a joint project for a new sustainable marketing campaign, we received an emergency call from Los Angeles. Kevin had broken into Laura's office, destroying documents and equipment, and threatening to reveal more dark secrets of our family if we didn't cease our business activities. It was a moment of panic and despair, but also of determination. We would not allow the past to dictate our future. We decided to file a formal complaint against Kevin and collaborated with local authorities to ensure our safety. In addition, we implemented stricter security measures both in our offices and in our personal lives. Marcus continued to strengthen our digital defenses, while Emma organized community events to reinforce our reputation as ethical leaders in the renewable energy industry. Despite our efforts, the pressure continued. Kevin managed to spread harmful rumors through social media and local media, trying to sow doubts about our integrity. However, the transparency and support of our community played a crucial role in countering his attempts. Loyal clients and business partners began to defend us publicly, sharing their positive experiences and reaffirming our credibility. In the midst of this storm, the relationship with Laura became stronger than ever. We supported each other, reminding ourselves why we had started this journey and what we were trying to achieve. The family therapy sessions we had begun became a fundamental pillar in keeping us united and resilient in the face of adversity. Finally, after months of struggle, Kevin was arrested and faced charges of harassment and corporate sabotage. The relief was immense, but I also realized how much we had grown through this experience. The renewable energy company had not only survived the storm, but had also emerged stronger, gaining even more recognition and trust in the market. With Kevin out of our lives, we were able to fully focus on our growth and the new opportunities that presented themselves. Marcus, now with his position in Boston more consolidated, began to explore the possibility of expanding our company to the East Coast. Emma, always creative, launched a line of eco-friendly promotional products that became a hit with our customers. Laura, having overcome her own challenges, became an inspiring leader within her marketing agency. Her experience with Kevin prompted her to advocate for healthier work environments and to support other professionals facing similar conflicts. Together, our lives were more intertwined than ever, each one strengthening the other in times of need. Looking back, I realized that every obstacle, every betrayal, and every challenge has led us to where we are today. San Francisco has become more than just a workplace. It is a symbol of our resilience and determination. With Marcus, Emma, and Laura by my side, I feel there is no limit to what we can achieve. Now, as we enjoy a quiet evening in our Mission District apartment, watching the city lights reflect on the water, I feel a deep gratitude for the journey we have traveled. The scars of the past have healed, leaving room for a bright and promising future. And although there will always be challenges ahead, I know that together we can face them and emerge victorious. Story 2. My parents promised to help me buy my first house, but they used the money for my favorite sister. So, I called my grandparents. Now they've lost their extra income, and I have the money for my house. I'm 24 years old, and I've been working and saving like crazy for the past 3 years because I want to buy my first house. It's not something that came out of nowhere. My parents promised me that, when the time came to buy my first house, they would help me with the down payment. This was something they'd been telling me since I was about 14 or 15, and although I didn't expect them to do everything for me, I always thought I could count on them to at least give me a good foundation. The thing is, I have a younger sister, she's 21. I don't want to sound cruel, but she's always been my parents' golden child. No matter what she does, my parents are always behind her, justifying her, helping her, or simply ignoring the things she does wrong. I, on the other hand, have had to fend for myself from a very young age. They have always been much stricter with me, and although at first I thought it was because they wanted me to be more responsible, now I'm starting to think that it's simply easier for them to ignore me. For years, my parents assured me they had been saving a fund to help me with my house. They even showed me a savings account that, according to them, was intended for that. They always told me not to worry, that they would be there for me, and like a fool, I believed them. Well, last week I discovered that it was all a lie. It turns out my sister just started a business. It's something completely crazy, something that has no guarantee of success. But my parents decided to use all the money they had saved for me to finance it. Yes, all of it. They didn't even consult me. I found out because my sister couldn't resist and sent me a text message saying something like, "I hope you don't mind, but Mom and Dad are helping me with my business. I can't believe how much they are investing in me." At that moment, I thought maybe it was something small, but when I asked my parents, they dropped the bomb. They told me they had used my fund because my sister needed more support and that my time would come later. When I tried to explain to them that this wasn't fair, that they had made me a promise, they simply told me that I should understand that my sister had a unique opportunity and that it was better for the family. Better for the family? What about me? Am I not part of the family? I was so upset I couldn't even speak. I told them what they had done was a betrayal and that I could never trust them again. But, as always, they minimized it by saying that I was overreacting and that I should be happy for my sister. Here's the thing. I'm not against them helping my sister. What bothers me is that they used the money they promised me, the money they had already set aside for me. They didn't even consider asking my permission or letting me know. They just did it as if my life and my plans didn't matter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt betrayed, angry, but also desperate. I didn't know what to do because now all my plans were shattered. I had been counting on that money to be able to make the down payment on the house, and now everything was lost. I tried to look for other options, but the truth is that I don't have enough to cover everything myself, not without years more of work. And this is where my grandparents come in. They have always been much fairer to me than my parents. I knew that if I told them what was happening, they would support me, but I also felt that it was unfair to put them in this position. They are older and have worked hard all their lives. The last thing I wanted was to be a burden to them. But, at the same time, I couldn't keep putting up with this situation without doing something. After thinking about it a lot, I decided to call them. The conversation was difficult because I didn't want to sound like I was asking for help, but when I told them what my parents had done, I couldn't help but burst into tears. I felt so helpless, so lost. My grandparents were silent while I explained everything, but I could feel that they were furious, not with me, of course, but with my parents. My grandfather was the first to speak. He told me something that made me cry even more. "Don't worry, dear, we'll take care of this. I won't let your parents ruin your future this way." That phrase made me feel relieved, but also guilty. What right did I have to ask them for this? I tried to tell them that I didn't want to cause them problems, but my grandmother interrupted me. She told me that it wasn't my fault, that they knew that my parents had always favored my sister, and that this was simply the last straw. That night, my grandparents told me to come to their house to talk more thoroughly. I felt a mixture of relief and fear, because although I knew they would support me, I also knew that this could cause a big conflict in the family. But I had no more options. I couldn't stay silent while my parents continued to treat me as if I didn't matter. Early Saturday morning, I drove to my grandparents' house. They live on the outskirts of the city, in a small house they've had since before I was born. It's the only place that has always made me feel completely safe, and I knew I would find support there. Upon arriving, my grandmother greeted me with a strong hug, as if she already knew how much I needed that gesture. We sat in the living room, and once I calmed down enough to speak, I told them everything again. I explained how my parents had used the money they promised me to finance my sister's business, without even consulting me. I also told them that it wasn't just about the money, but about how this was just the latest example of years of favoritism towards my sister. I felt as if I had never been a priority for them, as if I only existed to be my sister's backup. My grandfather was quiet, frowning, while I spoke. My grandmother, on the other hand, was furious. "How could they do this to you?" she said, waving her hands with indignation. "That money was for your house. They said so themselves. How dare they take it away from you like that?" What surprised me the most was how quickly my grandfather made a decision. "This can't stay like this," he said firmly. "We're going to talk to your parents. I won't let them continue doing this." I tried to protest. I didn't want my grandparents to confront my parents, because I knew that would only make things worse. My parents already considered me ungrateful for not understanding their decisions, and I was sure that the conflicts would only escalate if my grandparents got involved. But my grandfather wouldn't listen to me. "It's not just for you, dear, it's for justice. I'm not going to stand idly by while your parents abuse your trust." My grandmother, meanwhile, was already making coffee and preparing cookies, as if she needed an excuse to keep her hands busy. She looked at me gently and said, "This is not your fault, and it never was. You shouldn't carry the blame for your parents' bad decisions." After talking a little more, my grandparents made me promise that I would stay with them all weekend. They didn't want me to face all this alone, and they also didn't want my parents to try to pressure me into understanding their position. I felt a little calmer knowing I had their support, but I was also terrified of what might happen next. Sunday morning, my grandfather picked up the phone and called my parents. From the other room, I could hear parts of the conversation. It was brutal. My grandfather didn't raise his voice once, but the tone in his voice made it clear that he was furious. "How dare you treat your own daughter this way?" he asked. "You promised her that money, and then you used it for something completely different. What kind of parents do that?" The conversation lasted almost an hour, but in the end it seemed that my parents were not willing to admit their mistake. My grandfather left the room, took off his glasses, and sighed deeply. "They're not going to change their minds," he said. "They keep saying they did it for the good of the family. But don't worry, we're going to take care of this." That night, my grandparents surprised me with some news. They told me they were going to use part of their savings to help me with the down payment on my house. "We've been saving for emergencies," explained my grandfather. "And this, dear, is definitely an emergency." I cried. I told them that I didn't want them to sacrifice themselves for me, that I could find another way to get the money, but they wouldn't listen to me. My grandmother held my hands and said, "This is not just about the money, it's about you. You are our granddaughter, and we are not going to allow your parents to continue treating you like this. No more." The next day, I returned to my apartment feeling relieved, but also a little guilty. I knew my grandparents were doing it out of love, but I couldn't help but feel like I was asking too much of them. However, what I didn't expect was what happened next. A few days later, my parents started calling me. At first, I ignored the calls, but then they started sending me text messages full of reproaches. They said things like, "How could you talk to your grandparents about this? You made us look like the bad guys." And, of course, they also included passive-aggressive comments like, "We always knew you were jealous of your sister. This just confirms it." I didn't respond. I simply didn't have the energy to deal with them. But after a few days, my sister also started calling me. The most surprising thing is that, instead of apologizing, she said something that left me frozen. "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this," she said. "Mom and Dad are helping me because I have more potential. You can manage." I blocked my sister and my parents on all social media and on my phone. I couldn't continue to endure the toxicity. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I also knew that I needed to prioritize my well-being. What I didn't expect was my grandparents' reaction to all of this. A few days later, they called me and told me they had made an important decision. "We're not going to allow your parents to keep treating anyone else like this," my grandfather said. "You'll see what we've decided to do." A few days later, my grandfather called me and asked me to stop by their house. He said he needed to tell me something important. Although I was already emotionally exhausted by all the drama with my parents and my sister, I couldn't ignore my grandparents, especially after everything they were doing for me. So I got in the car and drove to their house. When I arrived, my grandparents were sitting at the dining room table, with papers scattered everywhere. I sat down with them, and my grandfather, with a serious but calm expression, explained what they had decided. "Your grandmother and I have been talking a lot about what happened," he began. "And it's not just about what they did to you this time. It's about how they've treated you your whole life. We've always noticed the differences, even though we tried not to interfere. But this time they went too far." He looked me in the eyes and said something that left me speechless. "We've decided to change our will." At first, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but my grandmother stepped in to clarify. "Your grandfather and I had always planned to divide our inheritance equally between your parents and your uncles," she explained. "But now we've decided that everything we were going to leave to your parents will go to you." I was completely shocked. It was much more than I expected or even wanted. My grandparents aren't rich, but they have a paid-off house, some investments, and a small retirement fund. Knowing that they were willing to change their plans to ensure that I had a secure future was overwhelming. "We don't want you to feel guilty about this," my grandfather continued. "Your parents have already shown that they are not responsible or fair. If we leave them that money, it would probably end up on some whim for your sister, and we are not willing to allow that." I tried to protest, telling them that I didn't want them to make such big decisions just because of what had happened, but my grandmother interrupted me, holding my hand. "Honey, this isn't just about this. It's a whole pattern. Your parents have been prioritizing your sister for years, and this is just one more sign that they're not going to change. We want to make sure you're okay, because they clearly won't." Although I still felt guilty, I also felt immense gratitude. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was really defending me, that someone understood how unfair it all had been. My grandparents promised me that they wouldn't say anything to my parents about the change in the will. "We don't want any more drama," my grandfather said. "When the time comes, they'll find out. But for now, this is between us." I spent the rest of the day with them, trying to process everything that was happening. I felt lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But I also knew that this wouldn't end here. My parents weren't the type to let things go easily, and I suspected they would soon try to contact me again. And I was right. The next day, my sister posted a long message on social media, basically calling me selfish and ungrateful. She didn't mention specific details, but she made it clear that she was talking about me. She said things like, "Some people don't know what family sacrifice is, And it's sad when someone prefers to divide the family instead of supporting it. I'm not going to lie, it hurt to read that, especially because I knew my parents were probably behind those words. Fortunately, I had my grandparents on my side. When I told them about the post, my grandmother told me not to worry. The people who matter know the truth, she said. And those who don't, well, you don't need those people in your life. I tried to move on and focus on my work and planning the purchase of my house, but my parents weren't ready to leave the subject. They started sending messages to friends and family, telling them a distorted version of what had happened. According to them, I had stolen from my grandparents and was manipulating them into being against them. They even went so far as to say that I had threatened to cut off all contact with them if they didn't give me the money. Of course, none of that was true, but some people started to believe them. Suddenly, I started receiving messages from cousins and uncles I barely knew, saying things like, "How can you do this to your family? And your grandparents shouldn't get involved in this. It's between you and your parents." The most frustrating thing was that no one seemed to understand my side of the story. Everything my parents said was accepted as the absolute truth, while I felt like I was screaming into the void. Every time I tried to explain myself, it ended in even bigger arguments. Finally, my grandparents intervened. They called several family members and explained what had really happened. They said that my parents had used the money they promised me without my consent, and that I had done nothing wrong by telling them what happened. Although some family members changed their minds after hearing the truth, others continued to support my parents. But at that point, I didn't care anymore. I knew I couldn't control what other people thought. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from my mother. It was the first time she had tried to contact me directly since I blocked everyone. At first, I didn't want to answer, but curiosity got the best of me. When I answered, her tone was cold and direct. "Do you really think you're doing the right thing?" she asked. "You've destroyed our family. Your sister is devastated, and now your grandparents are against us, all because of you." That was the last straw. I finally mustered the courage to tell her everything I had been keeping in for years. "I wasn't the one who destroyed anything," I said. "It was you, with your favoritism and your lack of respect for me. I've always been a second choice for you, and this time I'm simply not going to stay silent." I hung up before she could answer and blocked her again. I couldn't continue allowing them to make me feel like I was the problem when I clearly wasn't. That night, I received a message from my grandfather that said, "We are proud of you. Keep going, and let us handle the rest." And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. After cutting off all communication with my parents and my sister, I decided to focus on myself and my plans. I no longer wanted family drama to dictate my life. Fortunately, with the help of my grandparents, I was able to resume the process of looking for a house. Every step I took forward was like a small act of rebellion against everything my parents had tried to sabotage. It was my way of saying, they don't need me to move on. My grandparents, true to their word, began to transfer the money I needed for the down payment on my house. Although I tried to insist that they didn't have to do so much, they wouldn't listen to my objections. "This isn't just to help you, dear," my grandmother said one day, while reviewing the figures. "This is to show your parents that they have no right to control you or treat you like a secondary option. You deserve this." With the financial and emotional support of my grandparents, I finally found a perfect house for me. It wasn't a mansion or anything extravagant, but it was mine. A place I could call home, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was an exciting moment, albeit a little bittersweet, because I knew my parents would never be there to celebrate with me. But I realized that was okay. I no longer needed their validation. However, the drama with my family hadn't ended. Just a few days after signing the house papers, my parents found out that my grandparents had helped me. I don't know how they found out, but I suspected. Someone in the family had been spying and gossiping. The reaction was immediate. My parents started calling my grandparents, demanding explanations, saying that they had interfered in a matter that didn't concern them. My grandparents, as always, handled the situation with impressive calm. My grandfather, in particular, has infinite patience, but also a special talent for putting people in their place without raising his voice. According to what they told me later, he said something like, "It's not your place to question how we use our money. If you had kept your promise to your daughter, we wouldn't have had to intervene." Of course, this only enraged my parents further. My mother even went further, accusing me of manipulating my grandparents to be on my side. When my grandparents told me this, I couldn't help but laugh. Manipulate them? They were the only ones who had taught me what true justice and unconditional love were. I didn't have to manipulate anyone. They simply defended me because they knew it was right. Despite my parents' attempts to pressure them, my grandparents didn't budge an inch. Not only that, but they also began to be more vocal about my parents' behavior at family gatherings. Instead of remaining silent and letting my parents tell their distorted version of events, my grandparents began to tell the truth. They explained to everyone who would listen how my parents had betrayed my trust and left me hanging for my sister's whim. This, obviously, further divided the family. Some relatives began to distance themselves from my parents, realizing that their favoritism towards my sister wasn't something new. Others, however, clung to my parents' narrative, insisting that I was ungrateful and selfish for not accepting the situation. At first, it bothered me a lot that someone could think that of me, but over time I learned to let it go. I didn't need those people's approval. I had my grandparents, and that was enough. The most surprising thing came a few months later. One day, while I was organizing my new house, I received an unexpected call. It was from my uncle, my mother's brother. We had always had a rather distant relationship, but what he said left me speechless. "I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did," he said. "I've always noticed how your parents favored your sister, but I never wanted to interfere. Now I see that I was wrong to remain silent." It was a short call, but significant. Although it didn't change the whole picture, it made me feel validated. Not everyone in the family was on my parents' side, and little by little things were beginning to come to light. Meanwhile, my parents and my sister continued to try to control the narrative. My sister posted more innuendo on her social media, implying that I had stolen money that belonged to the family. My parents even tried to contact my employer to warn them about my supposed manipulative behavior. Luckily, no one paid attention to them, and it all ended up being a desperate attempt to save their image. As the months went by, I began to feel a peace that I hadn't felt in years. My house became my sanctuary, a place where I could be completely myself, without worrying about the expectations or judgment of my family. My grandparents continued to visit frequently, helping me decorate and making sure I didn't lack anything. They even organized a small dinner party to celebrate my new house, inviting only the family members who had supported me from the beginning. One day, while I was sitting with my grandparents in my living room, my grandmother looked at me and said something I will never forget. "This is the family that matters. You don't need anyone else." And she was right. I didn't need my parents or my sister to be happy. I had built a life that was completely mine, with the help of the only people who had always been on my side. Now, almost a year after it all started, I can confidently say that I made the right decision. My relationship with my parents is still broken, but I've learned to accept it. Some people are simply not meant to be part of your life, even if they share your blood. My grandparents, on the other hand, have become my rock. Their love and support have given me the strength to keep going, and I can't thank them enough for everything they've done for me. Although the situation with my family is still complicated, I finally feel like I'm in control of my life, and that, for me, is worth everything. Story 3. My resentful stepdaughter set a trap for me with peanuts on our honeymoon, and I ended up in the ER. Now she's desperate and threatening to drop out of college after her father cut her off financially for her cruel prank. My name is Savannah, 36F, and I just got married a couple of weeks ago to my boyfriend of almost 5 years, Benjamin, 48M. He was widowed almost a decade ago. His previous wife passed away when his daughter, Lucy, 19F, was still very young. I am deeply sorry that Lucy had to go through the loss of her mother at such a young age, and that's why I have tried, since I met Benjamin, to be respectful of the memory of his late wife and Lucy's role in the family. However, from day one, Lucy has resented me. I don't know if it's because she feels like I'm usurping her mother's place, or if she simply doesn't like me. The point is that she has always shown me an attitude of disdain, strange looks, passive-aggressive comments, and, in general, an air of superiority that makes me uncomfortable. When Benjamin and I started dating, she was around 14 years old. Her adolescence was in full swing, and I assumed that part of that rejection was normal, or at least understandable, given the situation. I never wanted to replace her mother. In fact, I respectfully made it clear to her that if she needed to talk, or just someone to listen, I was there, but if she preferred a space without my presence, I would also understand. My strategy of leaving her alone had its ups and downs. There were times when Lucy seemed to lower her guard a bit, and other times she seemed to double down on the hostility because I didn't react with anger or shouting to her provocations. Benjamin tried to mediate, but he himself said he was tired of the tension. At one point, 2 years ago, Lucy went off to study at a private university in California. With her departure, the dynamics at home improved, and since I didn't have her in front of me so often, the conflicts decreased. Benjamin continued to support her financially. Tuition, room and board, and some spending money. Although her grades weren't brilliant, he was proud to see her progress. Last year, Benjamin and I decided to get engaged. It was a decision we discussed calmly, although I was a little nervous about how Lucy would take it. To my surprise, when she found out, she didn't show any explosive reaction. In fact, she said something like, "If that's what you want, then fine." It wasn't effusive support, but at least she didn't directly oppose it. Over time, we planned our wedding, which ended up being a rather discreet event at a beautiful restaurant near the coast in South Carolina. Lucy attended wearing a navy blue dress and a remarkably calm demeanor. She posed for some photos, greeted the few guests we had, and generally didn't cause any drama. Inside, I felt a great relief. I thought, maybe we're finally entering a stage of peace. On the wedding day itself, she came over to congratulate me, albeit with a somewhat distant air. It was something like, "Well, congratulations. My dad is happy, that's good." And she left. But I couldn't complain. No, at least she wasn't rude. Everything looked wonderful until, about 2 weeks before our honeymoon date, Lucy told me she was dying to travel with us. Originally, Benjamin and I were going to spend our honeymoon in Key West, Florida, to enjoy the sun, the beach, and some alone time. My first reaction was, "What's the point of your daughter joining us on our honeymoon?" But Benjamin, who is very understanding and tries not to say no to his daughter when he can please her, started suggesting that maybe it would be an opportunity to bond with Lucy. At first, I flatly refused. I felt that on a honeymoon, one wants privacy. Besides, I knew Lucy's history and the latent tension that still surrounded us. Why risk a trip that could turn into chaos? However, Benjamin insisted that Lucy had obtained special permission to be absent from university for a few days because her summer classes wouldn't start until later. He argued that if she traveled with us, she could then fly back directly to her campus without having to go home, and that this trip could be something memorable for the family. With some reluctance, I agreed. I thought that maybe I was exaggerating. Suddenly, Lucy had calmed down and, despite our differences, hadn't done anything serious in over a year. Perhaps the waters had finally calmed, and this was the ideal opportunity to at least coexist in a more relaxed environment. The day of the flight to Florida was a bit chaotic. Lucy arrived from California just 4 hours before our flight. She came directly with her luggage, and we had almost no time to talk. Benjamin and I had everything planned. We would spend the first 2 days in Miami visiting a couple of friends and relaxing, and then we would head to Key West, where I booked a suite with ocean views. Lucy would stay in a separate adjoining room within the same hotel, but on a different floor for privacy. The first few days in Miami went surprisingly well. We toured South Beach, tried Cuban cuisine, and even took some pretty nice family photos. Lucy acted normal, maybe a little cold towards me, but nothing alarming, and she seemed to be in a good mood. She even made some jokes about the sweltering heat of the city and asked me for sunscreen recommendations. It was the first time I felt her more open to talking without a scowl. When we finally arrived in Key West, I was thrilled. The hotel was wonderful, with a huge pool and direct access to the beach. After settling into our respective rooms, Benjamin invited me to walk along the seashore for a while. Lucy said she preferred to rest, but that she would join us later for dinner. Everything seemed to be going great. Nothing made me suspect what would come next. I have a severe peanut allergy, something Benjamin knows very well. I always carry an EpiPen, epinephrine injection, with me in case a reaction occurs, but I never thought that, being on our honeymoon, someone would dare to offer me something containing peanuts without warning. The surprise came the next day, when Lucy insisted that I try a typical dessert she had seen on the hotel restaurant menu. The plan was for the two of us to share it as a gesture of goodwill, and although I normally ask about the ingredients in detail, this time I let my guard down because Lucy assured me that she had checked everything beforehand. When I realized that my throat was closing up, my first instinct was to panic. We were in the hotel restaurant, a beautiful place with windows overlooking the sea, and I remember that there were still glasses of water and juice on the table. Lucy looked at me with wide eyes, holding the spoon with which she had served the last piece of that cursed dessert. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a strained thread of air. "Lucy, my EpiPen. It's in my bag," I managed to articulate, feeling a harsh, tingling sensation running down my trachea. "Quick!" I think at that moment, she understood the magnitude of the situation. She jumped up and ran to my bag, which I had left on a chair next to the table. Meanwhile, I put my hand to my neck, trying to swallow, and noticing that with each second my breathing became more difficult. The murmur of other diners and the beating of my own heart mixed in my ears. When Lucy approached with the auto-injector, my hands were shaking so much that it took me forever to use it. As soon as I was able to inject myself, I felt a slight relief, but not enough to stabilize me completely. I noticed several waiters approaching, alarmed, and someone shouted to call 911. In an instant, there was a commotion throughout the restaurant. Benjamin, who had been away for a few minutes to talk to a receptionist, he wanted to arrange a boat tour for the next day, reappeared running when he saw the commotion around me. I remember his distraught face. He took me by the shoulders and asked me again and again, "What happened? Are you okay? My God, you're pale." Lucy stood up without saying much. Her face was white as a sheet, and I don't know if it was my paranoia, but I noticed her more nervous than worried. I could barely gesture clumsily. The itching in my throat and the lump forming in my chest were unbearable. Although the EpiPen gave me a momentary respite, I still needed urgent medical attention. The paramedics arrived surprisingly quickly, probably used to dealing with emergencies in a busy tourist area like Key West, and they put me in an ambulance. Benjamin rode with me, while Lucy stayed behind, claiming she preferred to collect our things and follow us in a cab. In the ambulance, the paramedics put me on oxygen and confirmed my allergic reaction. The trip to the hospital was short, but it felt eternal. Benjamin kept rubbing my hand. His eyes reflected a mixture of helplessness and terror. When we finally arrived at the ER, I was immediately transferred to a gurney. There they administered antihistamines and steroids intravenously. At some point, between the dizziness and the adrenaline, I heard Benjamin tell a nurse that I was allergic to peanuts and that someone had put that ingredient in a dessert without warning. The nurse reassured him, explaining that they were going to keep me under observation at least overnight. Hours later, I was somewhat more stable. I still had an oxygen tube and N4 connected to my arm, but at least I no longer felt that suffocating tightness. Benjamin was by my side, holding my hand, looking like he hadn't slept in 72 hours. I asked about Lucy, and he replied that she had sent a message saying she was in the waiting room. "Do you want me to let her in?" he asked softly, as if he feared my answer might upset me. "No, yes. I don't know," I replied weakly. "Did she tell you anything about how it all happened?" Benjamin shrugged. "She told me that Lucy had only mentioned that she wanted me to try a special dessert and that she didn't know it contained peanuts. At first, I thought maybe it had been an oversight, an unfortunate accident. But almost immediately I remembered how insistent Lucy had been about, 'Don't worry, I've already checked the ingredients. It's typical here.' It was very strange. Lucy knows about my allergy very well. She's known since before she turned 15. Benjamin has had 1,000 conversations with her about my condition, and at home, there is an entire shelf free of any nuts, precisely to avoid accidents. I couldn't understand how, in a supposed eagerness to do me a favor, she forgot to ask the chef if they used peanuts or any kind of peanut butter. I was like that, debating between sleep and confusion, until dawn, wondering if Lucy had made a mistake, or if, no. I didn't want to reach that dark conclusion. It didn't even seem logical that someone would intentionally plan something like that. But my subconscious kept sending alerts. The next morning I woke up with a slight improvement, although still dizzy. Benjamin had gone to get coffee. The nurse explained that they would probably discharge me in the afternoon if everything remained stable. It was during that interval that Lucy came to see me. She entered hesitantly, closing the door behind her. "I'm so sorry, Savannah," she said, not daring to make eye contact. I had no idea the dessert had peanuts in it. I didn't know what to say. I just watched her expression, looking for signs of sincerity. She looked tired, and I assumed she hadn't slept well either. Genuine repentance? Or fear of the consequences of her actions? Are you sure you didn't know? I asked softly. Lucy, this almost killed me. She looked up for a second, almost angrily, as if my question offended her. Then she lowered her head again. Her voice was choked as she replied. It was an accident. I never thought the chef would use peanuts. I didn't even check. My heart beat hard. Lucy had an apologetic tone, but something in her body language didn't match. Besides, I had heard when she said, I've already checked the ingredients. I remained silent. I wanted to believe it was just a terrible mistake, but I found it very difficult. Just then, Benjamin came in with a couple of coffees. He was a little surprised to see us talking. Lucy hurried out of the room, claiming she wanted to sit in the waiting area. My husband looked at me with worried eyes, as if waiting for me to give him some clue as to what had happened. What do you think? He asked in a shaky voice. I told him there was something that didn't add up. I reminded him how much Lucy seemed to insist that I try that dessert, her exact words. Don't worry, Savannah. The chef knows how I want it. Benjamin frowned, but didn't say anything immediately. I knew him well enough to know that he didn't want to believe his daughter was capable of something so cruel. Hours later, I was discharged on the condition that I return the next day for a final checkup. My body was sore, and my mind was exhausted. Benjamin helped me get into a wheelchair to a taxi, as we preferred to avoid the ambulance at this point, since it wasn't an emergency. When we arrived at the hotel, the manager approached us, visibly concerned, asking if everything was okay and if we needed anything. Benjamin and I preferred to go straight up to the room so I could rest. Lucy didn't show up for a while. Later we learned that she was at the pool, according to an employee. It was very strange. I would have expected her to be a little more concerned about my recovery, or to at least stay near me for a while, appearing more distressed. That night, in the privacy of our room, Benjamin confessed to me that he needed to talk to Lucy alone. I don't want to think badly, but I need to clarify whether it was a silly oversight or something premeditated. I didn't even know what to advise him. On the one hand, I feared for my own safety. On the other, I was terrified of breaking the father-daughter relationship. After all, Lucy had been through the trauma of losing her mother, and, although she was already an adult, I didn't want the relationship to be destroyed. Benjamin insisted that he was going to confront her directly, and he did so the next day, when he went with Lucy for a walk on the beach while I stayed in the room resting. When they returned, I noticed a look of contained anger on Benjamin's face. Lucy went straight up to her room without saying a word. Well, I asked Benjamin, closing the door behind him. She says she doesn't remember saying she checked the ingredients, he said bitterly. She claims she thought it was a dessert with macadamia nuts, which is typical here, and didn't consider that the chef might mix in peanut butter. And do you believe her? I murmured. Benjamin shook his head. Then he sat down next to me and let out a long sigh. I don't know what to think, Savannah. On the one hand, I want to believe it was a mistake. On the other, Lucy has had some very strange behavior in the past, and seeing your life at risk was not pleasant at all. We sat in silence for a while. My pulse was racing, and a million ideas were swirling around in my head. The accident, Lucy's latent resentment, the ruined honeymoon, the future of our family relationship. That same afternoon, I started to feel a little better physically, so I decided to leave the room and walk down the hotel corridor to clear my head. Suddenly, while waiting for the elevator, I heard Lucy talking on the phone around a corner. She sounded quite agitated. I swear it wasn't my fault. I didn't want it to go this far. She seemed to whisper, trying not to be heard. I swallowed, staying still so as not to interrupt. It was impossible not to think that this conversation had to do with me. A few seconds later, Lucy peeked around the corner, saw me, and quickly ended the call. We looked at each other in silence, and I noticed her eyes were moist, as if she had been about to cry. She walked around me and went towards the stairs without saying anything. That night, I couldn't sleep well. I was certain that Lucy had told someone what had happened and that, from what I could hear, she was genuinely worried. Worried that something serious had happened to me, or that we would find out. It was impossible to know for sure. The next day, after my morning checkup at the hospital, where they confirmed that I could travel back home whenever I decided, Benjamin suggested that we cut our honeymoon short. Lucy got very strange, as if she was having a panic attack. No, Dad. I don't want to ruin anything for you. I can go back to California by myself, she said in an almost hysterical voice. You don't have to leave. I'm not kicking you out, Lucy, Benjamin replied. but we're not comfortable. Your stepmother has just gone through a tremendous scare, and I'm not in the mood to go catamaraning as if nothing happened either." She remained silent. Then she sighed and ran off. For a moment, I thought she had started to cry. Benjamin turned to me. "I'm going to call the airline. I think we're all going back tomorrow." There was no protest from me. I wanted to leave Florida as soon as possible. Thus, our honeymoon ended abruptly, amidst the worst family atmosphere I could imagine. The flight back was tense. Lucy barely spoke to us, and at the airport, she took a separate Uber from our taxi. Once home, in my beloved corner of Tennessee, where we've lived for a few years, things went from bad to worse. Lucy announced that she was going straight back to California without even spending a night here, arguing that she had to return to the university residence as soon as possible. Benjamin got upset. "Aren't you even going to stay to talk this over calmly?" "Talk about what, Dad?" she replied, rolling her eyes. "I've already apologized 1,000 times. I don't understand why we have to keep going over it." Benjamin and I looked at each other in astonishment. I, at that moment, had no strength left for further discussion. In the end, Lucy simply took a plane to her campus. She left with her credit card and the money we always deposited for her expenses, and so Benjamin and I were left alone, trying to digest what had happened. My husband was furious and just as confused as I was. How to proceed? Should we limit Lucy's resources so that she understands the seriousness of her irresponsibility? The problem is that, deep down, one feels guilty for thinking about punishing a girl who has been through so much. But what about my safety? That night, we sat down to dinner, and finally Benjamin said to me, "I don't know if Lucy did it on purpose or not, but what I do know is that she doesn't take the seriousness of her actions seriously. That terrifies me." I didn't even know what to answer. I remained silent, holding back tears. After a while, Benjamin went into the room to make a couple of calls. When he came back, he told me, "I've blocked her credit card." I looked at him, stunned. Lucy had been depending on that card for her daily expenses for years, in addition to the money we sent her. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I won't leave her without tuition," he clarified. "I'll continue to pay for college because I promised her and because I don't want her to lose her studies. But I'm not going to give her any more money for her whims. It's clear that she doesn't understand limits, and this almost cost you your life." I took Benjamin's hand silently. On the one hand, I was relieved that he wanted to put a stop to it. On the other, I was worried that it would destroy the father-daughter relationship forever. Although, honestly, the relationship was already on the brink. A few days later, emails from Lucy started arriving in my inbox. First, they were short messages apologizing, then slightly longer messages where she told me she couldn't handle the guilt. Then they became aggressive, saying that I was exaggerating and ruining her connection with her father. She even accused me of manipulating Benjamin into dedicating all his resources to me, leaving his only daughter out in the cold. The messages to Benjamin were different, more emotional. She would send him texts in the middle of the night or call him to cry on the phone. "Dad, I'm truly sorry. It wasn't my intention to hurt Savannah. I don't want to lose you. You're my only family." Later, when Benjamin didn't give in to her pleas, she changed her tone to direct blackmail. "If you stop supporting me, I'm going to have to drop out of college because I won't be able to afford my basic expenses. Maybe it's better that way, if I can no longer count on my own flesh and blood." The pressure Lucy was putting on us caused me a huge internal conflict. On the one hand, I was terrified that she would really ruin her future. On the other, I couldn't forget that I almost died from that dessert prank. Would I be so naive as to think that mixing peanuts was harmless? Or deep down, was there a twisted intention to harm me? Benjamin started to become increasingly firm. He spoke with the administration of Lucy's university to make sure that at least her tuition and housing expenses were covered. He would fulfill that part as he had promised, but apart from that, he didn't plan to reactivate the card or continue financing her meals outside the cafeteria, her clothes, her outings with friends, or any other superfluous expenses. With the amount of scholarship Lucy had, plus her father's coverage for housing and tuition, she could objectively afford her basic needs if she worked part-time. However, Lucy refused to contemplate that option. One night, after dinner, my husband told me that he had been drafting a formal email to his daughter, explaining the situation clearly. He reminded her that he had not stopped paying for college. That promise still stood. He clarified that, being of legal age, 19, She needed to take responsibility for her personal expenses. He stressed that what happened on the honeymoon highlighted her lack of maturity, and that, until she showed genuine remorse and a change in attitude, she would continue to receive no more money. When I read it, I was surprised by the tone. It was the first time I had seen Benjamin speak to his daughter so directly and forcefully, without euphemisms. Still, it seemed necessary to me. Things had reached a critical point. Benjamin sent that email that same night. The next day, we woke up to a handful of desperate messages on our phones. Lucy lashed out at me, accusing me of being the reason for all her woes. She announced to Benjamin that if he didn't send her the money she was used to, she planned to drop out of college and travel to any other city where she could survive however she could. It was a low blow, a clear form of blackmail. She said that without money she wouldn't be able to eat, that she would be forced to give up her studies, and that she preferred to leave rather than suffer humiliations working part-time. Benjamin tried to call her several times, but Lucy didn't answer. She just kept sending loud texts, mixing anger with exaggerated sentimentality. "Dad, how can you think of abandoning me after everything we've been through together? Mom wouldn't have allowed it." With those words, she hit Benjamin where it hurt most. The memory of her mother and the guilt he sometimes felt for having fallen in love with me after his wife's death. I saw my husband's face full of doubt. He confessed to me that part of him wanted to run to hug Lucy, give her back her comfortable life, and fight no more. But the other side was furious at how she had put me in danger and considered that this tough love was the only way to teach her a lesson. A few days later, I found an additional detail that added fuel to the fire. Casually checking my emails, including the spam folder, I came across one that had gone unnoticed. It was a strange email, with no subject, from an unknown address. When I opened it, I saw that it contained screenshots of a conversation between Lucy and a supposed friend of hers. In those messages, Lucy appeared to be telling her friend, "It was a joke, nothing more. I didn't think she was that allergic. I didn't even put that much peanut in it. Now my dad is crazy, and the other one, me, is playing the victim." My heart started to beat hard. I read the date of the conversation. It had occurred 2 days after I left the hospital in Florida. Lucy, according to those screenshots, acknowledged that she had used peanuts on purpose. Her friend replied something like, "That's extreme. What if something worse happens to her? You could get in trouble." Lucy replied, "Oh, don't exaggerate. I'll make sure she injects herself if she gets bad. I just want her to get a little scared." I almost dropped the phone in shock. I was filled with rage and disappointment. If those screenshots were real, and they seemed authentic, with the profile pictures and names I recognized from Lucy's social media, then it meant my stepdaughter had planned everything. Maybe not to kill me, but to provoke my allergic reaction. I felt a knot in my stomach. Would she be capable of something so twisted? I called Benjamin, who was in his office working, and told him between sobs what I had found. He asked me to forward it to him immediately. I did. After an hour, he came home. He sat next to me and looked at me with eyes full of pain. "This is criminal, Savannah," he murmured without taking his eyes off the screen. "I don't know how my daughter has gotten to this point." He hugged me tightly. I felt my body stiffen, as if I couldn't process the magnitude of the matter. It seemed that Lucy had gone much further than we thought. This was no longer just a reckless prank. It was a conscious action that could have ended very badly. After we recovered somewhat from the shock, the toughest debate we've had in our marriage arose. Should we confront Lucy with this evidence? Should we go to the police and file charges for a possible attempted assault? Or should we simply use it as a tool for her to admit the truth and apologize once and for all? Benjamin was devastated. He never imagined that his only daughter could be capable of something so cruel. "I don't want to put her in jail. She's my daughter," he repeated over and over again. "But I can't keep ignoring the fact that she almost killed you intentionally." We spent hours discussing it. Finally, we agreed that we would try to talk to Lucy first. We would ask her to come home, show her the screenshots, and, depending on her reaction, decide how to proceed. Benjamin sent her a clear and direct message. "Lucy, we need you to come home this weekend. It's urgent. We have something important to discuss." We expected her to respond with evasiveness. But, to our surprise, she replied that yes, she would come on Saturday afternoon. Meanwhile, I spent several days with my heart in my throat. My mind was filled with memories of the situation in the restaurant, the emergency in Florida, the conversation I overheard, and now, those disturbing screenshots. Every time I thought about the possibility of seeing Lucy face to face, I felt a mixture of fury and fear. Saturday arrived. In the morning, Benjamin and I sat down to plan our strategy. He wanted to be the one to lead the conversation, stay calm, and show Lucy the messages. And if she dared to deny everything or make fun of it, then the option of involving the authorities would be considered. We agreed on that. Around 2 p.m., we heard the sound of a car parking in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Lucy getting out reluctantly, glancing sideways at the house. She looked tired, haggard, but also a little defiant. She came in almost without greeting. Benjamin invited her to sit in the living room. I preferred to stay standing next to my husband. "Can I know what's so urgent?" Lucy asked with apparent coldness. Benjamin took a deep breath and, without hesitation, took out his phone, opened the image folder, and showed her the screenshots. Lucy immediately turned pale. She took her father's cell phone to look more closely. Her hands were shaking, and her eyes went from the screen to our faces with an expression of panic. "What is this?" was all she could say. "You tell me," Benjamin replied harshly. "You wrote it." I looked at her and felt a chill. Lucy's breathing was agitated. She seemed to be looking for an answer or excuse. Finally, she dropped the phone and looked at us angrily. "Where did you get this?" "It's private." "More private is my health and my life," I said softly, with a lump in my throat. "And here you admit that you used peanuts knowing about my allergy." Lucy jumped to her feet, kicking the edge of the side table. Benjamin immediately ordered her to calm down. She exhaled forcefully and put her hands to her head. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that," she shouted desperately. "You don't know what really happened." "Then explain it to us," Benjamin demanded, raising his voice. "The only thing we read here is that you intended to scare Savannah and that, supposedly, you didn't care if she had a reaction or not, because, according to you, we would run to inject her. How did you get those messages?" "It's a violation of my privacy," Lucy complained, ignoring her father's question. "Lucy," I said as calmly as I could, "don't try to divert the conversation. We want you to be honest." At that moment, Lucy dropped onto the sofa with her hands covering her face. It seemed like she was starting to cry, but no real tears came out. It was more of a moan of frustration. Neither Benjamin nor I knew what to say or do. The moment of truth had arrived, and she seemed to want to escape. What happened in the next few minutes completely changed the dynamic. Lucy began to confess things haltingly, half-heartedly, but let's leave that crucial part for the next section because it really deserves a separate chapter. The shouting, the blame, the half-truths, everything became a whirlwind that would define, perhaps forever, the relationship between father and daughter and how I fit into the family. When Lucy left the house, leaving Benjamin and me behind, the feeling of emptiness completely invaded us. Her tears, her screams, and that chilling confession lingered in the air. She had planned to scare me with my allergy, risking anaphylaxis that almost cost me my life. Still, and despite the anger I felt, I, Savannah, believed there would be no more surprises. I thought everything would calm down after the confrontation. Lucy, at least, seemed to have shown some remorse. However, I didn't know that she wouldn't let this matter rest, and she would soon begin a twisted act of revenge to ruin our lives. 2 days after that explosive meeting, Benjamin and I received an email signed by Lucy. Upon opening it, the first thing we read made our hair stand on end. "If you don't return my funds and my credit card, I will publish the whole truth about your new wife on my social media. I'm going to expose her so that everyone can see who she really is, Dad. Don't play dumb. I know things about Savannah that can destroy her reputation." Reading that, I felt a knot in my stomach. Where did Lucy get the idea that I had something hidden that could damage my reputation? Benjamin looked at me in horror, trying to decipher if I was hiding some secret. But the reality was that, beyond my normal past, a divorce without children, sporadic financial problems, there was nothing shady that could destroy me. We thought it was a bluff. Still, the threats seemed clear. Lucy intended to get revenge. She wanted to force Benjamin to reactivate her cards and monthly deposits through blackmail. "Don't give in," I told my husband. "She's using your guilt to manipulate you." Benjamin, tense, nodded. "I'm not going to give in to her demands. It hurts me, but this time I'm going to stand my ground." The next morning, we woke up to a great commotion on social media. A couple of text messages from mutual friends warned us that Lucy had published a lengthy testimony on Facebook and Instagram, tagging family, acquaintances, and even college classmates. In that post, Lucy recounted a distorted version of the story. She claimed that I, Savannah, had hated her since I met Benjamin. She said that I had pushed her to serve me a dessert with peanuts and then falsely blamed her to separate her from her father. She played the victim, pointing out that I had convinced Benjamin to withdraw all financial support, leaving her on the street. And, worst of all, she insinuated that I was behind her mother's death, who had died years earlier from completely unrelated causes, implying that there were suspicions of my involvement in that event. When I finished reading that nonsense, I was shaking with indignation. Lucy had twisted the facts to a grotesque extreme, painting me as a usurper seeking to destroy her. Benjamin, upon seeing it, turned livid with rage. "This is too much," he exclaimed, reviewing the post in disbelief. "Now she's dedicated to defaming us in front of everyone." Within hours, several people close to us, including Benjamin's coworkers, began to contact us, worried. Some asked if it was true, others simply turned away, scandalized. It was Lucy's revenge materialized in rumors and defamation. We couldn't just stand idly by and watch Lucy spill her venom on social media. So Benjamin made a difficult decision: to consult with a lawyer. He explained that his priority was to protect us legally and, if necessary, put a stop to the smear campaign. "Lucy is trying to destroy us socially," he said, "and I don't think the best response is to remain silent." The lawyer listened to us attentively and reviewed the screenshots of the post and previous messages. His verdict was blunt. We could sue for defamation and also use as evidence the conversations where Lucy admitted that she had planned my allergic reaction. However, we had to be careful. Being Benjamin's daughter, the family situation would become a media circus if it went to court. That night, Benjamin confessed to me through tears. "She's my daughter. I don't want to see her behind bars. But I'm not going to let her destroy my life either." It was a heartbreaking moment. I understood him. Lucy was his only biological daughter, his baby, the girl he raised after the death of his first wife. But now, that girl seemed willing to destroy everything to get revenge. The next day, we sent Lucy a formal notification through the lawyer, demanding that she remove the posts and issue a public apology for defamation. The document also included evidence of her confession that she planned my allergic reaction and the conversations where she mocked the issue. We didn't expect her to take it well, but the response was more explosive than we imagined. Lucy sent an email full of insults, saying that we were monsters and that she didn't care if we sued her. In that same email, she wrote something that chilled me to the bone. "Maybe I deserve to go to jail, but first I'm going to make sure everyone knows the supposed truth about how Savannah has manipulated my father to get his money." Benjamin decided to call her immediately. Surprisingly, Lucy answered. They had a phone argument that lasted for almost half an hour. I heard my husband raise his voice, then try to calm down, and so on, again and again, until suddenly, he hung up and collapsed on the sofa, exhausted. Lucy told me she's coming home to talk face to face. We didn't know whether to take that as good or bad news. Was she coming to apologize? To ask for more money? To yell at us? The truth is, I feared for my safety. Who could assure me that she wouldn't try something more dangerous? However, Benjamin swore to me that he wouldn't let anything happen to me. Lucy arrived one rainy afternoon, without giving an exact time. She knocked on the door hard, and when we opened it, we immediately noticed her agitated expression. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were filled with resentment. She entered without waiting for permission and stood in the middle of the living room. "How dare you threaten me with lawyers?" she said, her voice trembling. "You're the ones who should be apologizing for treating me like this." Benjamin looked at her with pain. "Lucy, stop making this more difficult. Nobody wants to destroy you. You're the one who's defaming and lying." Lucy laughed bitterly. "Lying? Everyone saw how I almost killed her. But who travels with someone allergic to a place full of nuts?" I intervened. "You didn't come here to blame the victim. I expect you to stop your lies on social media." Lucy's face twisted with anger. "Of course, poor little victim. You stole my dad from me. Do you think that with a simple marriage you're going to erase the memory of my mother?" Those words hurt me, but I no longer had the strength to argue senselessly. I looked at Benjamin. He took a deep breath and faced Lucy with a calm voice, though charged with determination. "It's over, Lucy. Take down your posts, retract them, or we'll proceed legally." She put her hands to her head and let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh yeah? Well, do it. I don't care if the whole world sees the circus of this sweet stepmother and her allergy problem." "Stop mocking," I demanded. "You know you were the one who planned my reaction. You're lucky you're not behind bars." Lucy glared at me. "He's my father, not yours. I'll do whatever it takes to get you out of his life." Benjamin tried to restrain himself, but tears welled up in his eyes. "Lucy, enough. What happened to you? You weren't like this before. Why this hatred?" She seemed to be debating between pride and a pain that consumed her. "I don't know. I'm resentful. I'm hurt. But I won't let you ruin my life, Dad." At that moment, she did something unexpected. She took out her phone, pointed it at us, and started recording a video, shouting that we were harassing her. I was petrified. It was obvious she wanted to fabricate another lie for social media. Benjamin approached and asked her to calm down, but Lucy backed away. "Stay away. Everything is being recorded." The situation became dangerous. However, Benjamin was not intimidated. "Record whatever you want. I have enough evidence to prove you're making it up." Lucy, realizing that none of this fazed us, slowly lowered her phone. Her eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, she dropped the phone to the floor and fell to her knees, staring at the ground. It was a strange break, as if all the rage that had sustained her until that moment finally crumbled. "I'm ruined," she whispered. "I have no money. I don't have my dad. I don't even have." "By your own hand, Lucy," I replied softly. "You put my life at risk, and now you're using lies on the internet to get revenge." Did you expect Benjamin to react with hugs? Lucy said nothing more. She remained on her knees, trembling. Benjamin watched her with a face full of bitterness, but without approaching to comfort her. It was evident that he loved her, but this time his disappointment was greater than any protective impulse. "Lucy," he said, "you can still rectify this. Delete your posts. Tell the truth. Seek professional help. If you don't, you'll have to face the consequences." She awkwardly got up, picked up the phone from the floor, and without uttering a single word, ran to the door. We watched her until she disappeared into the rain. She left without an apology or a promise of change, leaving behind a kind of emptiness that no parent would want to feel. Since then, we haven't seen Lucy in person again. On the advice of our lawyer, Benjamin and I formally reported the defamation, with all the evidence we had. Lucy was forced to almost immediately retract her accusations on social media to avoid a more serious lawsuit. She didn't openly apologize. She simply disappeared from the internet for a few days. And when she returned, she had erased all traces of the incident. Benjamin continued to pay for Lucy's college, at least until the end of that semester. As far as we know, she opted to take an academic break and move to another state, without revealing where. A couple of times she called her father, crying on the phone, implying that she was sorry, but she never took the step of publicly amending the damage she tried to cause us. For me, the most difficult stage was facing the fear that Lucy would appear at any moment with more threats. However, over time, I realized that her revenge had been reduced to a sea of lies on social media that couldn't hold up against the facts. It was painful for Benjamin, who misses his daughter. Deep down, he longs for her to come to her senses. But at least we were able to protect our emotional and legal integrity. Now, as a couple, we move forward. Our honeymoon was cut short and turned into a nightmare, but we have emerged stronger by supporting each other. My allergy is still a risk, but we take more extreme measures than before to prevent any incidents. As for Lucy, only time will tell if she will one day seek reconciliation and accept psychological help, or, on the contrary, sink into her resentment. For now, her revenge plan backfired, leaving her more alone than ever. This is how this painful, incomprehensible, and bittersweet story ends. I have shared every detail to unburden myself, and, perhaps, so that there is a record of how far someone dominated by jealousy and rage can go. Nothing would have pleased me more than reconciliation, but sometimes revenge leads only to the ruin of everyone. Story 4. How did I become the guardian of my sister's 3 children after she abandoned them? Years later, they are thanking me with money, but she is furious and demanding the money. I am 45 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I never thought I would find myself in the situation I'm living now, but life has a strange way of surprising you. It all started about 10 years ago when my younger sister, Laura, decided she could no longer care for her three children, Sophia, 12, Diego, 10, and Valentina, 8. Laura was always a strong person, but somewhat unstable since we were children. We had our differences, but nothing we couldn't overcome. She had big dreams and many ambitions, but also a tendency to make impulsive decisions without thinking about the consequences. After college, she moved to Los Angeles with her then-boyfriend, hoping that life in the big city would offer her more opportunities. However, things didn't turn out as expected. In Los Angeles, Laura's boyfriend wasn't the man of her dreams. They soon realized their lifestyles were incompatible. He had a stable job at a tech company, while Laura struggled to find employment that allowed her to maintain her lifestyle. The pressure began to affect their relationship, and Laura started to feel increasingly overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising her children alone. One day, Laura called me desperate. She said she couldn't go on, that the debts were piling up, and she felt like she was failing as a mother. She begged me to help her, to take her children and give them a better life. I didn't have many options at that time, so I accepted, although it was very difficult for me to leave my own family in Seattle. After moving to Los Angeles, the reality was harsh. I had no experience caring for children of those ages, let alone in such a large and competitive city. My parents, although older, also joined in to help us, contributing financially and offering any kind of support they could. Together, we tried to create a stable home for Sophia, Diego, and Valentina. The first few months were a constant struggle. Laura, although absent most of the time, maintained a sporadic relationship with us. Sometimes she sent money, other times just text messages saying she was sorry. But, as time passed, she became more distant and rarely communicated. She began to resent the situation, blaming the children for getting in the way of her better life. Sophia, Diego, and Valentina were resilient children, but they could feel the tension in the environment. I strived to be a good father to them, although I often felt overwhelmed and exhausted. Diego was the most extroverted, always trying to make others laugh, while Valentina was more reserved, finding comfort in books and music. Sophia, the oldest, often acted as the mediator, trying to keep the peace between us and their mother. A year after the move, Laura disappeared completely. There were no more calls, messages, or attempts to contact us. It was a devastating blow for everyone. My parents, already in their old age, couldn't handle the additional burden, and I found myself struggling to balance work with raising the children. Things became even more difficult when the pandemic hit in 2020, increasing the stress and responsibilities at home. Despite everything, we managed to maintain some stability. I managed to get a better job and was able to increase the financial aid a little, but it was never enough to live comfortably in Los Angeles. I then decided it was time to make a drastic change. I had heard of a relocation program that helped families in difficult situations move to areas with a lower cost of living and better job opportunities. Without thinking twice, I applied, and, to my surprise, we were accepted. We moved to Austin, Texas, a completely different place. The warmer weather, the friendly community, and the promising job opportunities gave us new hope. However, the change wasn't as easy as I had imagined. Adapting to a new city, starting from scratch, and rebuilding our lives was a monumental challenge. But, with the support of my parents and the children's determination, we began to find our place in Austin. Sophia began to excel in school, Diego made new friends quickly, and Valentina found her passion in music, joining the school band. I also adapted, finding a new job that allowed me to spend more time with them. Little by little, our lives began to improve, but Laura's shadow was always present. We didn't know where she was or how she managed to survive, but the hope that one day she might return and be a part of our lives remained alive in our hearts. However, fate had other plans. Years later, when things seemed to be finally stable, we received an unexpected call. The children had grown up and wanted to thank me for everything I had done for them. After moving to Austin and several years of adapting to our new life, everything seemed to be going well. The children were thriving in their respective areas. Sophia excelled academically, Diego had found his passion in soccer, and Valentina continued to shine in music. I myself had secured a more stable job that allowed me to better balance my work responsibilities with the time I spent with them. One day, while we were enjoying a sunny afternoon at Zilker Park, Sophia approached me with a serious, yet smiling expression. "Uncle Juan," she said, "there's something we want to tell you." I sat next to her, curious to know what it was about. Diego, always the most direct, added, "We've been thinking a lot about everything you've done for us. You've given us a better life and supported us at every turn." Valentina, with her usual shyness, simply nodded and looked at the three of us. Sophia continued, "We want to thank you in a special way. We've decided to get together and give you a gift." My heart filled with emotion and surprise. "What kind of gift?" I asked, unable to hide the curiosity in my voice. Valentina took a small box out of her backpack and placed it on the picnic table. "It's a collection we made with the help of some friends and family who know how much we appreciate you." She opened the box, revealing a thick envelope with a blue ribbon. "It's money to help you with some expenses. We know you've sacrificed a lot for us, and we want to give back in some way." I was speechless for a moment, touched by their generosity and gratitude. "You don't know how much you mean to me," I finally replied, my eyes shining with emotion. "This is too much. It wasn't necessary, but I appreciate it very much." As I held the envelope, I couldn't help but think of all the sleepless nights, the financial worries, and the constant effort to maintain a stable home for them. This gesture meant more than words could express. However, just as I was beginning to enjoy this moment of happiness, my phone vibrated with a notification. It was a text message from Laura. My heart skipped a beat when I saw her name on the screen. Without thinking twice, I took out my phone and opened the message. "Juan, I need to talk to you about this matter. I don't agree with what the children are doing. It's inappropriate, and I want you to return the money immediately." I felt a mixture of confusion and anger. I didn't understand why Laura, who had been absent for so long, was suddenly getting involved in our lives in this way. Furthermore, her tone was firm and, without a doubt, she was upset. I decided not to respond immediately. Instead, I shared the news with the children. "Laura wants me to return the money you gave me." Sophia frowned, while Diego and Valentina looked worried. "Why would she do that?" asked Diego, always the protector. "We've worked hard to give you this because you deserve it." "Maybe she has her reasons." I tried to rationalize, though my mind was full of unanswered questions. "The important thing is that you did this of your own free will and with love." However, the conflict didn't stop there. That same night, Laura called me. The conversation was tense from the beginning. "Juan, I can't believe you accepted that. It's wrong and dishonest. You're taking what's rightfully mine." Trying to stay calm, I replied, "Laura, the children did this of their own free will. It's not something that belongs directly to you, and they deserve to be recognized for their effort." She didn't seem convinced. "You have no right to accept money from them. It's manipulation, and I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. I want you to take the money and stop getting involved in their lives." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a feeling of frustration and sadness. I couldn't understand why Laura was reacting this way. I had spent so much time and effort providing for the children, and now she was trying to interfere. The next day, I decided to meet with the children to talk about the situation. "Laura is upset because you agreed to give me this money, but we shouldn't let that affect our relationship. You did this because you appreciate me, and I want you to know that I will always be here for you, no matter what happens." Sophia looked at me with determination. "We won't let Laura make you feel bad. This is a token of how much we love you and appreciate everything you've done for us." Diego nodded, adding, "Yes, Uncle Juan, she may be upset, but we're not going to let that stop us. We want to move forward and continue supporting each other." Valentina, with a shy smile, added, "Thank you for being our support. We know we can always count on you." That moment reaffirmed my commitment to them. Despite the conflicts with Laura, I knew our relationship was strong and that together we could overcome any obstacle. However, the conflict with Laura remained a shadow in our lives, and I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for our little family in Austin. After the tense conversation with Laura, the situation in our family became even more complicated. Although the children and I were determined to stay united and support each other, Laura's shadow continued to affect our daily lives. I didn't know exactly what she was planning, but her call had made it clear that she wasn't willing to let go of what she considered an injustice. A few days after the call, I noticed a change in the children's behavior. Sophia, always so organized and responsible, began to show signs of stress. Diego, who used to be the life of the party, became quieter and more reserved. Valentina, with her love for music, stopped attending band practice, claiming she no longer had time. I was worried that the tension with Laura was affecting their emotional well-being. I decided to address the situation head-on and spoke with each of them individually to better understand what they were feeling. Sophia, I've noticed you're a little stressed lately. Is there anything you want to talk about? I asked one afternoon while we were doing homework together in the living room. Sophia sighed deeply before answering. It's just that all this drama with Laura is affecting me. I don't understand why she can't just let us live our lives in peace. Diego nodded, adding, Yes, Uncle Juan, we worry about you and we don't want this to hurt you. But sometimes I feel like we're trapped in this situation without being able to do anything about it. Valentina, who was generally the most reserved, finally spoke in a soft voice. I just want all this to end. I don't want us to continue living with this weight on our shoulders. Their words touched me deeply. I knew I had to find a way to protect them from the negativity that Laura was bringing into our lives. I decided it was time to seek professional help for the children, someone who could help them deal with their emotions and the stress they were experiencing. I contacted a child therapist recommended by Sophia's school and arranged weekly sessions for each of the children. At first, they were reluctant to open up, but over time they began to trust and express their deepest feelings. The sessions not only helped them manage their emotions, but also strengthened our relationship as a family. Meanwhile, Laura didn't stop trying to interfere. She started showing up at unexpected family gatherings and leaving messages on my social media, accusing me of stealing her children and taking advantage of her situation. Her behavior became increasingly erratic and aggressive, creating an atmosphere of constant tension. One night, while we were having dinner, I received an anonymous call claiming to have information about Laura's whereabouts. I was worried, but I decided not to share the information with the children so as not to worry them more than necessary. Instead, I informed the local police, as I suspected that Laura might be looking to cause trouble or try something more serious. The following weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. Laura increased her attempts to contact me, sending threatening emails and leaving messages on my voicemail. My patience was wearing thin, and I was beginning to feel that this situation would never end. One day, while checking my emails, I found one from Laura that said, I know you're hiding something. You're not going to keep quiet forever. You'll face the consequences of your actions. This message was the last straw. I decided I could no longer let Laura affect our lives this way, and that it was time to take more drastic measures. I had heard about support groups for families in similar situations and decided to join one. There I met other people who had gone through similar experiences and who had found effective ways to deal with toxic family members. I learned about healthy boundaries and how to protect my loved ones from negative influences. Over time, we strengthened our family ties and learned to better manage the stress and emotions related to the situation with Laura. However, I knew that we couldn't completely ignore her presence in our lives. I decided to hire a lawyer to advise me on how to proceed legally and protect my family from any future interference. The day Laura tried to confront me at a family gathering, I was prepared. The presence of the lawyer and the support of the support community gave us the confidence we needed to face her. When Laura burst into the meeting, she tried to verbally harass me. But this time, I didn't let myself be intimidated. I clearly explained to her that her actions were unacceptable and that, if she continued, we would take the necessary legal measures to protect the children and ourselves. The confrontation was tense, but Laura finally realized that she no longer had control over our situation. Her behavior began to subside, and, over time, she stopped trying to interfere in our lives. The children and I were able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that we had regained control of our own narrative. Although the wound never completely disappeared, the family grew stronger through adversity. The children thrived even more, knowing that they had a father and a family who loved and supported them unconditionally. I learned valuable lessons about the importance of setting boundaries and seeking help when the situation required it. Over time, the tension with Laura decreased significantly. Although her presence remained an occasional shadow in our lives, we had learned to handle difficult situations with maturity and determination. The children, now young adults, had found their way, and I, along with them, had strengthened my family and personal ties in a way I never imagined possible. A few months after the confrontation at the family gathering, I received an unexpected call. It was from one of my cousins who lived in Chicago. He informed me that Laura had sought professional help to manage her behavior and was attending therapy regularly. Although the news surprised me, it also filled me with hope. Perhaps, finally, Laura was willing to face her own demons and find a way to heal. I decided to write her a letter. I wasn't looking for immediate reconciliation, but I did want to express my feelings sincerely and openly. In the letter, I told her how her absence had deeply affected the children and me, but I also acknowledged the effort she had made to improve. I didn't know if she would respond, but I felt it was a necessary step to close this chapter of our lives. A few weeks passed without news, and life went on. The children continued to excel in their careers and personal lives, and I had found a new passion in community volunteering, helping other families facing similar challenges. I felt that, despite all the pain and struggle, we had emerged stronger and more united. One day, while attending a community meeting in Austin, I ran into Laura. She was in the conference room, actively participating in a discussion about family support and emotional well-being. We looked at each other for a moment, and I could see a genuine transformation in her. She came over and greeted me with a shy smile. "Hi, Juan," she said softly. "I wanted to thank you for not giving up on us." I felt a wave of emotions. I accepted her thanks with a smile, knowing that this encounter represented a necessary closure for both of us. There were no resentments, only a mutual understanding of the wounds we had faced and the hope for a better future. Over the years, the relationship between Laura and me transformed. We weren't as close as before, but there was mutual respect and an understanding of our respective life paths. The children, now fully grown adults, had also built healthy relationships with their mother, recognizing her efforts to improve and heal. Reflecting on everything we had been through, I realized that true strength lay not in avoiding conflicts, but in facing them with love, patience, and determination. We learned that, although the wounds of the past never completely disappear, it is possible to find peace and happiness through forgiveness and unconditional support. The experience taught me the value of family, the importance of setting healthy boundaries, and the need to seek help when circumstances require it. The challenges we faced united us in a way I never would have imagined, and each of us found our own path to personal fulfillment and well-being. Today, living in Austin, I feel grateful for the resilience and love we have shared. The children have created their own successful and happy lives, and Laura has found her own inner peace. Although the road wasn't easy, each obstacle overcome taught us valuable lessons about life, family, and forgiveness. Looking to the future, I know there will be more challenges, but also more opportunities to grow and love. Our family story is a testament to the human capacity to heal, adapt, and find the light, even in the darkest of times. And, as I continue my journey, I carry with me the certainty that, no matter what life throws our way, we will always have each other to support and love unconditionally. Years later, as I reflected on everything we had lived through, I decided to share our story on Reddit. I wanted others to know that, despite adversity, families can find ways to stay together and overcome the most difficult obstacles. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people connected with our experience, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. Receiving messages of gratitude and support from people across the country reminded me that we were not alone in our battles. The online community became an invaluable source of strength and understanding, and, together, we created a space where families could find hope and solidarity. Story 5. I discovered my husband and his mother were planning to use my inheritance to pay off my brother-in-law's gambling debts, so I secretly left and am planning how to rebuild my life without them. I never thought I'd end up sharing my story in a place like this, but I feel like I need to get it all out. I'm 29 years old and have been married to my 32-year-old husband for 3 years. I always believed we had a solid relationship, though not without its problems, like any marriage. However, the last few months have made me question everything I thought I knew about him, his family, and honestly, myself. Let me back up a bit. My husband and I met through mutual friends at a bar in Austin, Texas. He was charismatic, always the life of the party, and although his energy was a bit overwhelming at times, it was also what drew me to him. He came from a very close-knit family, or so I thought. I, on the other hand, come from a complicated past. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 21, and while it was devastating, they left me a significant inheritance that I invested carefully. That inheritance was the foundation of my financial stability and also what allowed me to dream of a more peaceful future. From the beginning, his family was always, well, intense would be a good euphemism. His mother, in particular, had strong opinions about everything: how I should dress, where we should live, even when we should have children. But I always thought it was her way of caring. My husband used to justify her behavior with phrases like, "Yeah, that's just her, but she means well." Honestly, I didn't want to cause problems, so I let a lot of things slide. The first red flag, which I now realize I should have taken more seriously, occurred right after our wedding. His mother insisted on paying for everything, saying it was a gift from the family to us. I was grateful and didn't want to seem rude, so I accepted. But after the wedding, I found out that my husband had signed a loan in both our names to cover the additional costs that his mother forgot to mention. I was incredibly upset, but he assured me it would be temporary and that he would pay it off himself. Reluctantly, I let it go. Fast forward 2 years. We had been trying to have a baby with no luck. The stress of fertility treatments was getting to him and his older brother. He never explained exactly what they were doing, but whenever I asked, he'd say something like, "We're just sorting out some family stuff." I didn't want to seem nosy, so I didn't push it. But everything changed a few weeks ago. I had finished a work meeting from home early and decided to surprise my husband with his favorite meal. I went to his mother's house because I knew he was there. When I arrived, I found the door slightly ajar, and, without thinking much, I went in. In the living room, I heard voices. His mother and he were speaking in low tones, but loud enough for me to hear what they were saying. She was asking him if he had managed to convince me to transfer part of my inheritance to a joint account to better manage our finances. He replied that not yet, but he was working on it. My heart started to beat faster, but what I heard next left me frozen. His mother reminded him that this transfer was crucial to pay off his older brother's gambling debts, which had accumulated to an exorbitant amount betting in casinos. She even suggested that, if I refused, he should consider giving me reasons to trust him more, which sounded incredibly manipulative. I was paralyzed. I wanted to go in and confront them right then, but something stopped me. I knew that if I did, I could make things worse, and I needed time to process what I had just heard. I left the house quietly, got in my car, and drove aimlessly for hours, trying to understand how my husband, someone I completely trusted, could be planning something like this behind my back. When I finally got home, he was already there. He looked at me and smiled as if nothing had happened. He hugged me and said his mother had sent her regards. I faked a smile, but inside I was shattered. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing, wondering what else they might be planning and if there were signs I had ignored all this time. Since that night, I overheard my husband and his mother talking about using my inheritance. I've been walking on a tightrope. Despite all the anger and sadness I feel, I've remained calm in front of my husband. I need him to think everything is normal while I plan how to get out of this situation without him noticing. The idea of being trapped in this relationship with a family that sees me as an ATM is simply unbearable. The next day, I went to the bank to check my accounts. Although I have several investments and my finances are diversified, I wanted to make sure my husband didn't have access to anything. And that's where I found something that almost made me collapse. My husband had tried to access one of my savings accounts just 2 weeks ago. He had requested information on how to open a joint account with those funds. Fortunately, my name is the only one registered on that account, so the bank didn't give him access. But the fact that he tried without even mentioning it to me made it clearer than ever what was happening. After that discovery, I started taking steps to protect myself. First, I contacted a lawyer specializing in divorce for an initial consultation. I wanted to understand my rights and what steps I should take to ensure my husband couldn't get his hands on my money. The lawyer was straightforward with me. As long as my inheritance is solely in my name, he has no legal right to it. But if he somehow managed to get me to transfer the funds to a joint account, things would get complicated. That confirmed what I already knew. I couldn't stay in this relationship a second longer than necessary. The next step was to get organized. I've lived in this city for almost 5 years, and although I have a stable job and a house I love, I knew I would have to leave all that behind. My husband has too much influence here. His family is well known in the community, and his mother has connections that could complicate my exit if I decided to confront them directly. So I started looking for options in other cities. I considered Denver, Chicago, and even Portland. I wanted a place where I could start over, but also where it wouldn't be easy for them to find me. While working on my plan, I began to notice small changes in my husband's attitude. It was as if he was trying to be more affectionate, but in a way that felt forced, almost as if he were following a script. He started bringing me flowers, something he rarely did, and constantly asked me how I was feeling. He even mentioned that we should plan a vacation, something that had never been on his priority list before. These displays of affection only confirmed my suspicions. He was trying to manipulate me, to gain my trust so he could convince me to hand over my savings. One night, while we were having dinner, he brought up the subject directly. It was casual, as if it were an idea that had just occurred to him. Maybe we should consider consolidating our finances, having everything in a joint account to make it easier to manage expenses. It's what couples do, isn't it? My heart was beating so fast I thought it could be heard across the room. I forced myself to stay composed and calmly replied, "It's a good idea, but I think our accounts work well as they are. Besides, we don't have any major debts or anything complicated, so I don't really see the need." I looked him straight in the eye, trying to decipher his reaction. There was a flash of frustration on his face, but he quickly hid it with a smile. Sure, it was just an idea," he replied. After that, he changed the subject, but I knew he wasn't done. This was just the beginning of his attempts to convince me. Meanwhile, I also started to investigate more about his brother's gambling debts. I had heard rumors before, but I never paid much attention to them because I didn't want to get involved in his family's problems. But now it was personal. Using a bit of creativity and some casual conversations with acquaintances, I discovered that his brother was in much more serious trouble than I imagined. He not only owed money to casinos, but also to local lenders, and not the friendly kind. Apparently, he had been threatened several times, and his family was desperate to find a solution before things got out of control. In retrospect, everything made sense. His mother's kinder attitude toward me in recent months, their family's efforts to include me more in gatherings, and even my husband's sudden interest in having a solid financial plan, it all revolved around one thing: my money. Every day that passed, I felt more alone and more betrayed. My husband wasn't the man I thought I was marrying, and his family wasn't just intrusive, they were calculating and manipulative. My trust in him was completely destroyed. By then, I had already spoken to my boss about the possibility of working remotely. I didn't give him too many details, just mentioned that I was considering moving for personal reasons. To my relief, he was very understanding and told me they could accommodate me as long as I maintained my performance. Knowing I had that option gave me a small light at the end of the tunnel. My plan was simple: move without warning, close any joint accounts we had, transfer all my investments to a different financial institution, and completely cut off contact with his family. I was already looking for apartments in the city I had chosen and organizing the details of my move. When I returned the call to the unknown number, a deep, serious voice answered on the other end. "Who is this?" the man said, in a tone that immediately gave me goosebumps. I carefully identified myself and explained that I had noticed multiple calls from his number. His response was direct and cold. "I'm looking for my brother-in-law. I know you're part of his family, and we need to talk about his debts." At that moment, I felt as if the world had stopped. Why were they calling me? I had had practically no interaction with my brother-in-law's business dealings, let alone anything related to his debts. I tried to stay calm as I replied that I had nothing to do with my brother-in-law's finances. "I don't know how you got my number, but I think you have the wrong person. I have nothing to do with whatever is going on with him," I said, trying to sound firm. The man let out a dry laugh before replying, "I don't have the wrong person. We know who you are, and we know your husband is involved too. He promised to resolve this, so you better find a way to pay before this gets worse." My heart was beating so fast I thought I was going to faint. I ended the call immediately and stood there, paralyzed, with the phone in my hand. My husband was involved in this. He had promised he would resolve his brother's debts, and even more terrifying, he was using me as part of his plan. The pieces began to fit together in my head like a macabre puzzle. I knew I couldn't stand idly by. That same night, while my husband was in the shower, I checked his phone. I had avoided doing something like that before because I didn't want to cross that line of invading his privacy, but after the call I received, I felt I had no other choice. And what I found confirmed my worst fears. There were messages between my husband and his older brother, as well as with other unknown numbers. In one of them, his brother was thanking him for convincing me to transfer funds. In another, my husband assured someone, presumably the lender, that the money would be available soon. There were even messages with his mother where they discussed that this problem needed to be solved before things got more complicated. Each message was like a dagger stabbing deeper and deeper into my heart. My husband wasn't just involved in his brother's debts. He had already made promises to third parties using my money, all without my consent. That night, I barely slept. My mind wouldn't stop racing, trying to process what I had discovered and thinking about what I should do next. It was clear that time was of the essence. I had to get out of this situation before they tried anything else. I was no longer just facing the emotional betrayal of my husband, but a real threat to my financial and even, perhaps, physical safety. The next day, I went to the bank early in the morning. I changed all my passwords, blocked any external access to my accounts, and transferred all my funds to a new financial institution where my husband didn't even know I had an account. I also asked the bank to block any attempts to open joint accounts with my name without my explicit authorization. The manager looked at me with concern and asked if I needed any further assistance, but I just told him it was a precaution. My next step was to gather all the important documents from our house: my passport, my birth certificate, financial documents, and anything else I might need. I made digital and physical copies and kept them in a safe place outside the house. I also started packing my personal belongings little by little, hiding what I could in my car and at a close friend's apartment, who had offered to help me in case of an emergency. During all this time, my husband suspected nothing. He continued to act in a loving and attentive way, as if he were making up for something, which only increased my rage. There were times when I wanted to confront him, yell at him everything I knew, but I restrained myself. I knew I needed to leave before he or his family could react. About a week after that call from the lender, something happened that confirmed my time was running out. It was a Saturday morning, and my husband left early to help his brother with something. I stayed home alone, taking the opportunity to continue organizing my departure. While checking the mail, I found an envelope that appeared to have been left in the mailbox by hand. It had no stamp or sender, just my name written in black ink. I opened it curiously, but what I found inside chilled me to the bone. It was a copy of a loan agreement signed by my husband and his brother, promising to pay an exorbitant sum of money within 2 months. And worst of all, there was a handwritten note at the bottom that said, "If you don't comply, we're going to solve this our way." That night, after receiving the envelope with the threat, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Everything I had planned so far had to be put into action. My priority wasn't just protecting my money, but making sure I was safe from any retaliation. The fear of what they might do to me, or what they might try to force me to stay, kept me in a constant state of alert. I waited for my husband to return that night. When he arrived, I acted as if everything was normal, even managing to fake a smile as he told me how he had spent the day helping his brother. I watched him carefully as he spoke, trying to decipher if he was nervous or suspected anything. But he seemed completely oblivious to my plans. While we were having dinner, he casually mentioned that his mother wanted us to spend Sunday at her house to talk about future plans. I didn't ask any further questions, but something in his tone made me feel that the meeting would be an attempt to pressure me even more. That night, while he slept, I went over everything I would need for my escape one last time. I had a clear list in my mind: documents, bank cards, some clothes, my electronic devices, and the most important contacts I might need. I had already spoken with my close friend, who had offered to stay awake that night in case I needed last-minute help. I had also booked an Airbnb in a city 6 hours away, a discreet place where no one related to them could easily find me. At 4 a.m., I got up quietly. I already had most of my things hidden in the car, so I just grabbed a small backpack with the essentials and tiptoed downstairs. Every creak of the floor under my feet made my heart race, but I kept going. I knew that if I stopped or hesitated, I might lose the opportunity. When I reached the car, a feeling I can't describe in words washed over me. There was a sense of relief, as if I was finally freeing myself from a trap, but I also felt fear. What if he realized too soon? What if he found me? These questions kept popping up in my head as I drove toward the main highway, leaving everything I knew behind. I arrived at the Airbnb without any problems. It was a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, away from any commercial areas or busy downtown. The owner was a very kind, elderly woman who didn't ask too many questions, which I appreciated. I locked myself in the place and started organizing the next steps. I knew my husband would eventually notice my absence, but I had to buy myself some time. The first thing I did was turn off my personal phone and activate a device I had bought specifically for this moment, a prepaid cell phone with no direct connection to me. I used this device to contact my lawyer and give her a quick update. She assured me that as long as I didn't share my location and took additional precautions, I would be fine. She also indicated that she would begin the legal separation process that same week. My next call was to my friend, who confirmed that she had picked up the rest of my things from her apartment and that she would keep them in a safe place until I could pick them up. I asked her to be on the lookout for any strange movements from my husband or his family and to let me know if anything out of the ordinary happened. 2 days passed before he started actively looking for me. My friend sent me a message letting me know that she had received calls from him and his mother, both demanding to know where I was. According to her, their tone was a mix of concern and anger. Then she told me something that made my stomach churn. My mother-in-law had called my friend directly and bluntly told her that she knew she was hiding me. She even went so far as to threaten her, saying there would be consequences if she didn't cooperate. This only confirmed that my intuition had been correct. They were desperate. Meanwhile, I kept in contact only with my lawyer and my friend. I decided not to respond to any messages or calls from my husband, who, according to what they told me, had started sending me desperate text messages. The first ones were concerned, saying things like, "Please tell me you're okay," or "I don't understand what's going on." But they quickly turned aggressive. One of the last ones I saw before turning off my phone completely said, "You have no right to do this. You're my wife, and you should trust me." That last line made me so furious that I clenched the phone tightly. Trust him after everything I had discovered? Did he really think he had the right to say that to me? The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. My lawyer officially filed the divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences, but also making sure to include a statement about the financial manipulation and implied threats I had received. This would not only protect my assets, but also help me in case they tried to take legal action against me. Shortly after, I received an email from my boss confirming that my request to work remotely had been approved. This small detail was a huge relief. It meant I could continue working while I reorganized my life. I also started looking for more permanent places to live. I knew the Airbnb was only a temporary solution, but finding my own home would make me feel safer. The last move I made was to ask my lawyer to request a restraining order against my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who were the most aggressive figures in this whole situation. My husband hadn't yet done anything that would justify including him, but if he crossed the line, I wouldn't hesitate to act. The first few days after filing the divorce papers were the most tense of my life. I was in a constant state of vigilance, checking the security cameras I had installed in my new apartment, looking out the window every time I heard a car stop, and trying to anticipate what my husband or his family's next move would be. My lawyer had warned me that because it was a sudden separation, they were likely to try to contact me aggressively. And they did. In the following days, my husband's messages became increasingly erratic. They went from desperate apologies like, "Please come back, we can talk about this," to veiled threats like, "You can't hide forever. Sooner or later you'll have to face me." The final blow came when I received a notification from my lawyer. My husband had filed a response to the divorce petition, refusing to accept the terms and demanding access to my finances. He had even included an absurd argument claiming that my inheritance money should be considered marital property because, he said, I had used it to benefit us as a couple. It was ridiculous, of course, because my inheritance had never been touched to pay for anything related to him or his family. But the fact that he had the audacity to try something like that filled me with rage. The tensest moment came a few weeks later when my friend called me completely distraught. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law had shown up at her house, insisting that she tell them where I was. According to my friend, my mother-in-law even tried to push the door open while yelling things like, "We know you're hiding, that ungrateful woman. What kind of friend are you?" My friend, being as brave as ever, confronted them, and made it clear that she would call the police if they didn't leave. After that incident, I knew I couldn't allow this kind of behavior anymore. I talked to my lawyer that same afternoon, and she acted quickly. She filed the restraining order against my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, citing not only the incident with my friend, but also the implied threats in the debt contract they had tried to link my husband and me to. Fortunately, the judge who reviewed the case approved the order immediately. Although I still felt uneasy, that small step gave me a break. Little by little, I began to rebuild my life in my new environment. I found a more permanent apartment on the outskirts of the city, far enough from the hustle and bustle to feel safe, but with access to everything I needed. My remote work became a blessing, not only because it gave me financial stability, but because it kept me busy and distracted from moments of anxiety. During this time, I also started going to therapy. I had been ignoring the emotional impact of everything that had happened, but it was becoming increasingly clear that I needed to process my feelings. My therapist helped me understand that my husband's betrayal was not only an attack on my trust, but also a reflection of how I had allowed my own voice to be silenced in the relationship. I had spent so much time trying to be the good wife that I had forgotten to set clear boundaries from the beginning. However, my peace didn't last long. My husband didn't take the restraining order well and began to intensify his attempts to communicate with me. Although he couldn't physically approach me, he started sending letters through third parties, begging me to reconsider the divorce. In one of those letters, he admitted to being involved in his mother and brother's plans. But of course, he tried to justify himself by saying he had done it under pressure. He even mentioned that his mother had threatened to disinherit him if he didn't cooperate with the plan to use my inheritance. What angered me the most was his inability to take responsibility. Instead of admitting he had made a mistake and sincerely apologizing, he continued to blame others. At this point, I no longer cared what he had to say. I had emotionally ended that relationship long before I left our house. The divorce hearing finally arrived. It was a grueling process, but my lawyer handled everything with precision. During the hearing, my husband tried to paint himself as the victim, saying that I had abandoned him without explanation and that I hadn't given him a chance to fix things. His mother, who had been called as a witness, tried to use the same manipulative speech she had always used. She was never part of our family. She always wanted to take my son away from us. But the facts were on my side. My lawyer presented all the evidence, from the messages I discovered on his phone to the debt contract and the written threat in the envelope. Everything was clear to the judge. They had tried to manipulate me and use my money to cover their problems. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the divorce and protecting my assets. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, but also a renewed strength. I had fought for my independence and my safety, and I had succeeded. Today, I am starting to build a new life. I moved to another city almost 1,000 miles away, and I finally feel like I can breathe. There are still difficult days, nights when I relive everything that happened and wonder how I didn't see the signs earlier, but there are also days when I feel stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that my worth is not defined by a relationship or by what others expect of me. Story 6. My sister cheated with my fiancé the night of our engagement, and my family supported her. 5 years later, she's bankrupt and begging me for a $7,000 loan. My name is Amelia, 27F, and until a few years ago, I thought my life was more or less normal. At least, my dramas were the typical ones of college, work, and friendships. I grew up in a suburb near Chicago, Illinois, and my family seemed close. By seemed, I mean that, being the eldest daughter, I always tried to be the example. Good grades, avoiding trouble, trying to help my parents with everything. I have a younger sister, Emma, 25F, with whom, as children, I shared a room, secrets, joys. In short, a relationship I thought was unbreakable. I met Oliver, 28M, during a volunteer project in my second year of college. He was helping organize a fundraising event in a Minneapolis community, and we were on the same team. There was chemistry from the start, we started dating, and after graduation, I moved to his city for a while. Although eventually, we returned to Chicago to be near my family. After 4 years of dating, he proposed. It was a dream come true. He took me to a restaurant overlooking the lake, with soft music, and pulled out the ring. Everything pointed to us being together forever. My sister Emma was always very close to Oliver, almost too close for my liking, but I never thought it was anything strange, because she is quite extroverted by nature. Still, shortly before the proposal, I had started to notice uncomfortable situations, glances between them, slightly odd comments from her. "Oh, Oliver looks so handsome in that shirt. You're so lucky, Amelia." Even so, I told myself I was being paranoid. The night of our engagement, my parents organized a small party at home. They invited some close friends, family, and neighbors. The idea was to intimately celebrate the I do and share a pleasant time. I remember that everything was beautiful: warm lights in the patio, quiet music, delicious appetizers. Oliver and I looked like the perfect couple, receiving congratulations everywhere. People were having fun. I felt like the happiest woman on the planet, and my parents were proud to announce that there would be a wedding. During the celebration, I stepped away for a moment to take a call from a coworker. Nothing important, but I went to a corner of the garden looking for some quiet so I could hear her well. Afterwards, I decided to go back to the living room to continue with the party. As I peeked through a side door, I saw something that to this day I can't get out of my head: my sister Emma kissing Oliver. But it wasn't a friendly kiss or a slip-up. They were kissing with a passion that left me in shock, as if no one else existed. At first, I thought I had had too much to drink and my imagination was playing tricks on me, but no. There they were, hands intertwined and bodies pressed together. I was so stunned that I dropped my cell phone, and there was a strange silence, as if everything in my head had shut down. I don't remember if I screamed, cried, or just stared. What I do remember is that Emma and Oliver saw me there, petrified. Neither said anything at first. Emma, her eyes full of panic, turned her face away, and Oliver took a step back. It was an eternal second, and, without thinking twice, I turned around and left the house without even grabbing my purse. I got in my car and drove aimlessly for a long time. I was devastated. It was my sister and my fiancé on the night of our engagement. That night, I stayed at a roadside motel outside of Chicago. I turned off my cell phone because it wouldn't stop ringing. The next day, with my mind a little more in order, I read messages from my sister and Oliver. Messages that said, "We need to talk. I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened. I didn't want to hurt you," etc. But I also noticed something more disturbing: messages from my own parents telling me to talk to Emma and that I shouldn't exaggerate the situation. I had a mixture of rage and pain that prevented me from returning to that house. How could they not understand what they had done to me? My sister, with whom I shared almost my entire life, had just betrayed me with the person I thought would be my partner forever. And my parents, instead of defending my pain, were trying to get me not to exaggerate. I felt alone, helpless, and betrayed. I stayed in that motel all weekend, ignoring calls and messages from almost everyone. I only texted my best friend, Lily, 27F, to let her know where I was for safety. She gave me her unconditional support and encouraged me to go get my things and end the relationship, since clearly there was no turning back. But I didn't want to face anyone yet. It was a long weekend full of tears. When I finally mustered the courage to return to my parents' house, I was met with a very strange scene. Upon entering, I found Oliver, Emma, and my parents in the living room, as if they were waiting for me. My Aunt Pauline, 60F, was also there, who has lived with my parents for a couple of years because she was widowed and had nowhere else to go. As soon as I walked through the door, everyone started talking at once, as if they had been rehearsing what they were going to say to me for hours. Oliver approached me first and said we needed to talk alone, but I couldn't even look at him. I tried to dodge him and said I was just coming to collect my belongings. That's when Emma stepped forward, with tears in her eyes, and told me something that left me frozen. "Amelia, I'm really sorry. Oliver and I didn't want it to happen like this, but we're in love. Please forgive me." My father intervened, trying to sound conciliatory. "Daughter, I know it was a hard blow, but things happen. You can't force love. If your sister and Oliver truly feel something, we must accept it." I listened to him and thought something in the universe had broken. Was I the villain in this story? My mother, instead of giving me a hug, gave me a similar speech. "Honey, it's not ideal, we know, but there's no point in making it such a big drama. Everyone can get along as a family." Family? What family were they talking about? They had just destroyed my trust, my relationship, my wedding plans. I felt so much anger and helplessness that I stood still, silent, looking at each one of them. Emma next to Oliver, holding his hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My parents asking me to be reasonable, to be mature, and to accept that life is like that. I wanted to scream, but I held back. With a trembling voice, I told them that I could not accept that relationship, much less celebrate it. I demanded that they all leave the house or leave me alone to pack my things. It was Oliver who, in a supposedly kind tone, said, "You don't have to leave, Amelia. We'll leave. I've decided to go live with Emma, since everything has been discovered. We think it's best that you stay." As if he were making a sacrifice by leaving me my parents' house. My mother and father had tense smiles, as if they secretly approved of the idea of Oliver staying with Emma. Someone tried to hug me. I don't remember if it was my mother or my Aunt Pauline, but I took a step back. "Don't touch me. Did you know or not? It doesn't matter. You've betrayed me." My parents said I shouldn't be dramatic, that it was time to be practical. They were asking me to be happy for my sister, to understand her. My father even said to me, "Daughter, you're an adult. You know you can't control love. You have to get over it." That was the last straw. I yelled at them that it was a shame they were defending that clandestine relationship. Without further ado, I went upstairs, collected several of my things, and walked out the door without saying goodbye. No one even bothered to stop me. Well, Oliver made a move to follow me, but Emma grabbed his wrist and stayed there. I guess they felt somewhat guilty, but not enough to back down. I drove straight to my friend Lily's apartment. She opened the door, and, as soon as she saw me, I burst into tears. I felt like my world had collapsed in a matter of days. I had not only lost my fiancé, but also the trust in my family. Lily made me some tea, let me vent all my resentment, and offered to let me stay with her as long as I needed. She even suggested I seek psychological help to process what had happened. That night, I had the worst nightmare. I saw my sister and Oliver getting married, and my family applauding, while I was locked in a dark room. In the following days, my phone exploded with messages and calls. My mother demanding that I talk to her. My father telling me not to be childish. Emma apologizing. Oliver telling me that this wasn't easy for him either. I read those messages, and every time my chest burned more. Also, Oliver's family wrote to me blaming themselves and admitting that they felt terrible about what happened, but they didn't know how to intervene. Weeks later, I received a wedding invitation. Yes, you read that right. Emma and Oliver were getting married. I thought it was a macabre joke, but the card was real, with their picture and the date. My parents, obviously, expected me to attend. The nerve was unbelievable. I decided to ignore them all and move on with my life. I changed my cell phone number and moved into an apartment with Lily. I invested time in my work and met new people. It was hard, but little by little I tried to rebuild my dignity and self-esteem. However, my family did not give up so quickly and continued to appear on social media and calls, until one day, I simply decided to block them all. For years I did not set foot in my parents' house again. I freed myself from all that drama, or so I thought. 5 years passed since that episode that shattered my life as I knew it. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but I did everything possible to rebuild myself away from that toxic family environment. I focused on my work. I was promoted in the digital marketing company where I work, and, with patience, I saved enough money to move to an apartment in Boston, Massachusetts, a city that always attracted me for its historical air and its cosmopolitan atmosphere. It wasn't easy leaving Chicago, but it was necessary to cut ties with those memories and, incidentally, expand my professional opportunities. During all this time, I completely ignored my family. I blocked my sister Emma and my ex Oliver on social media, so I wouldn't see anything about their lives. With my parents, at first I was more flexible. I had them muted, but not blocked. However, every time their notifications appeared, I ended up with a bitter feeling of guilt and anger at the same time. Why did my family betray me like that, and then expect me to act normally? I asked myself over and over again. During these 5 years, I dedicated myself to taking care of myself. I went to therapy a couple of times a week and met a guy, Lucas, 30M, a friend of my roommate in Boston, who became someone special to me. There was no rush. I learned to go slowly in relationships. Still, the shadows of the past appeared from time to time, reminding me not to trust so easily. Lucas was understanding, never pressured me to talk about my family trauma, and gave me space, which I greatly appreciated. Everything was going relatively calmly until one morning I received a call from an unknown number. I don't usually answer numbers I don't recognize, but I was waiting for confirmation of a new employment contract. I thought it would be something related to my work, so I answered. To my surprise, it was my mother on the other end. I made a move to hang up, but she moaned my name with such desperation that I couldn't help but keep listening. Amelia, please don't hang up on me. I know I don't deserve a word from you, but I beg you, it's urgent. I remained silent for a couple of seconds, with a lump in my throat. My mother sounded distressed, almost unrecognizable. I felt weak for not hanging up on her, but I couldn't. So I gave her a few minutes to explain what was going on. Amelia, your sister is going through hell. They're about to lose the house. The business failed, they went into debt, and now she has a bunch of creditors chasing them. We don't know what to do. Suddenly, my mind was filled with questions. What business? What are you talking about? What house are they losing? But above all, I was struck by the way my mother used that your sister. She referred to Emma as if it were normal for me to rush to help her. It was surreal. I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't see why you're telling me this. Daughter, Oliver and Emma started an event planning business a couple of years ago. At first it seemed to be going well, but then they had a lot of expenses and couldn't get any serious investors. They went into debt up to their necks. They sold almost everything. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. They're going to lose even the house they live in. The creditors, the interest, it's crazy. I felt a pang in my chest, half compassion and half anger. They were calling me only because they needed a financial bailout. Yes, that was it. My mother confirmed it 2 seconds later. They need $7,000 to pay off the urgent debts, and they don't know who to turn to. Your father and I can't ask for such a large loan. Emma and Oliver don't qualify for any more credit either, because they have a terrible track record. I thought that maybe you, well, I know you have a good job and that you could. I didn't let her finish. Are you serious, Mom? Do you think I'm going to help the people who betrayed me in the cruelest way? My mother began to sob. Please, Amelia, it's your sister and your ex. Yes, but deep down it's still family. We can't just let them fall like this. Don't you have even a minimum of affection for us? I closed my eyes, trying not to lose my temper. After a silence, I answered with a trembling voice. And where was the family affection when your other daughter and my fiancé cheated on me in my own house on the night of my engagement? When you were demanding that I celebrate their love? Don't make me laugh. You didn't lift a finger for me, and now you're calling me asking for help. My mother continued crying, saying things like, I just didn't think they would go this far. Oliver and Emma were very irresponsible, but in the end they're part of us. I found it hurtful that they weren't even able to apologize for the past. They were only focused on Emma and Oliver's current drama. I told her clearly that I wouldn't give them a penny, that I might have considered a humane gesture if they had at least acknowledged their mistake and sincerely apologized years ago, but no. They decided to emotionally expel me, and now that they were in trouble, they remembered me. No, that's not how it's done. I beg you to think about it, my mother whispered before hanging up, knowing that she wouldn't get anything else out of me. I stared at the phone as if waiting for another surprise call, maybe from my father or, worse, from Emma. But nothing happened. At that moment, my heart was racing. I called Lily, who remained my great support despite the distance. She is still in Chicago, but we talk daily. I told her what happened, and Lily repeated what my therapist and other friends have told me for years. You don't owe them anything, much less money. You're not their bank. After what they did to you, it's absurd that they're asking for help. Still, a part of me was uneasy. I don't like the idea of seeing my parents dragged into the suffering that Emma and Oliver's bankruptcy might cause, but I'm not their savior or their walking wallet either. A few days later, desperate messages from my mother began to arrive, telling me that Emma was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, that the lenders were harassing her, that Oliver was depressed, and that they were thinking of selling all their possessions to survive. I didn't respond. It hurt me to read so much misery, but I couldn't find a single reason to get involved. Besides, I thought it was very brazen that Emma didn't contact me directly, but used my mother as an intermediary. Is she not even able to swallow her pride and apologize to me in her ruin? I wondered indignantly. Every day, I opened my mailbox or my phone expecting new pleas. However, what I never thought was that Emma and Oliver would dare to show up in my new city, knocking on my door. I will never forget that afternoon. It was cold in Boston, with persistent drizzle since morning. I had returned early from work, loaded with documents and thinking of making myself some tea to relax, when I heard loud knocks on my door. When I looked through the peephole, I felt my heart skip an impossible beat. Emma, my sister, and Oliver, my ex, were there, drenched by the drizzle, their faces tense and distraught. I had no idea how they had gotten my address. I felt panic, rage, and surprise. My first impulse was to pretend I wasn't home, but the knocking didn't stop and they started yelling my name. Amelia, we know you're there. Don't ignore us. My neighbor Henry, 40M, came out into the hallway to see what was going on and asked them to stop yelling, that they were disturbing the whole floor. Emma and Oliver didn't even apologize. Somehow, it seemed that nothing mattered to them at that moment except talking to me. Finally, with trembling hands, I opened the door just a couple of inches, using the security chain. What are you doing here? How did you get my address? I blurted out. My voice trembled with contained rage. Emma hastened to speak. Mom gave it to us, Amelia. We know it's not the best, but we need you. We have to talk, please. I observed Oliver, who didn't dare to look me in the eye. He looked lost, as if he didn't know what to say. I decided that I wasn't going to let them into my personal space. So, with the door ajar, I told them that we had nothing to talk about and that, if they didn't leave, I would call the police. That's when Oliver raised his voice. We need you to lend us the money, Amelia. Please, we're asking you. You don't know the situation we're in. His plea sounded desperate, but there was also a tinge of demand, as if I had an obligation to save them. A feeling of disbelief washed over me. Did they really, after everything, think that I could give them such a large sum altruistically? Incredible. I wanted to slam the door in their faces, but Emma put her hand in and pushed it, trying to force the chain. We know this is hard. I know we hurt you. But listen to us, please. This isn't just about us. It's about the family. Mom and Dad are also suffering seeing us like this. My neighbor Henry came closer and asked if I needed help. I asked him, somewhat nervously, to call the police if the situation got aggressive. Emma noticed and lowered her voice, pleading with watery eyes. Amelia, look, we're not asking you to give us the money. We'll pay you back, I swear. But please, don't leave us like this. We're going to lose everything. Are you going to let your family be homeless? I gritted my teeth. My family, I thought. I had been sentimentally kicked out of that family the night I learned of their deception, and my sister and my fiancé had kept my life, my home, and my parents' support. 4 or 5 years, not a word of genuine remorse, only mockery and excuses, as if I had been the one who wanted to break the harmony. You had 5 years to approach me and sincerely apologize, Emma. 5 long years in which you ignored me. And now that you're sunk, you come begging for my help. Do you know how humiliating it all was for me? What I suffered while everyone celebrated your relationship with Oliver. She whimpered something like, I'm sorry, but it sounded more like a desperate formula than true repentance. Oliver, for his part, approached with a notebook in hand. Look, here we have a plan. We would pay you back the money at a reasonable interest rate, even with a contract. But please, give us this opportunity. You can save us. I was surprised by the ease with which he spoke of a contract when there wasn't the slightest hint of trust. Then I realized something. They were in pure survival mode. It wasn't about, I'm sorry, I love you, or, I really want to reconcile. They were trying whatever they could to get me, the person they destroyed, to throw them a financial lifeline. And, honestly, I didn't feel the slightest desire to do so. No. The answer is no. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. Oliver shouted, his nerves on edge. Are you going to let your own sister be ruined? Someone you once loved. This is inhumane. My blood boiled. I pushed the door, trying to close it completely. Emma, seeing my reaction, began to cry more intensely, throwing accusations at me. You can't be so cruel. We know you have savings, that you're doing well. Why are you so selfish? That was the last straw. I pulled the door hard and managed to close it, despite her putting her hand in a couple of times. I immediately put the deadbolt on and lowered the bar. Through the peephole, I saw that they remained there, banging on the door, yelling at me to listen to them. I backed away and felt dizzy, my heart pounding in my temples. My neighbor Henry was calling the police. Within minutes, 2 officers appeared who came up alerted by the building's doorman. Emma and Oliver were no longer shouting, but they had sat down in the hallway refusing to leave. They began to argue with the officers, arguing that they only wanted to talk to their sister. The officers asked them to identify themselves and explained that if the resident did not want to receive them, they should leave or they would be forcibly evicted. Emma looked at me one last time with eyes full of rage and pity and left, dragging Oliver. Not a goodbye, not a sincere apology, nothing. The rest of the afternoon, I was shocked. I thought about my parents, that they were surely behind that play to force a reunion. I felt a kind of moral nausea and also relief. At least they weren't at my door anymore. But it didn't end there. After a couple of hours, I received a very long text message from my mother on my phone, another unknown number. She said that she had heard how I kicked Emma and Oliver out and how I allowed the police to intervene. She called me ungrateful for not helping the family in a time of urgency and repeated that, when this storm passes, you will regret having turned your back on them. She accused me of immaturity and not knowing how to forgive. That was too much. I realized that I would never have peace as long as I kept even a minimal channel of communication open with them. So I blocked that number too. To not feel guilty, I wrote a small note in my diary. I don't owe them anything. They destroyed me, humiliated me, ignored me. I deserve my peace of mind. I'm not their wallet. I'm not their savior. That night, I talked to Lucas, my new partner, telling him point by point what had just happened. He offered to spend the night with me, worried about my safety. I told him I was fine, that I had neighbors willing to help if needed, and I was glad he didn't push it any further. Still, we agreed to see each other the next day in case I needed emotional support. The next day, I went to work feeling lighter. My parents didn't call me again. Emma and Oliver gave no sign of life. Sometimes I think my mother plans to reappear at any moment with a different drama, but I don't care anymore. I have learned to be firm in my boundaries. No one, not even your own blood, has the right to trample on your dignity and then demand favors. Ironically, Emma and Oliver's reappearance gave me closure on something I hadn't fully processed for years. Now I know that I have freed myself from that absurd guilt that made me think, what if I'm the bad daughter for not talking to them? No, I'm not. I'm simply protecting myself. What will happen to Emma and Oliver? Maybe they'll sell their furniture. Maybe they'll end up in a more modest home. Or, who knows, they'll move to another city to start over. It's not my problem. I know that my parents, from what I understand, are suffering the economic collapse that their daughter and son-in-law caused, but they should have thought about it before siding with them when I needed them most.